Hi everyone and welcome back. It's Thursday, the 27th of February 2025. This is Paul English Live. Just gone 8 p.m. here in jolly old England. Just gone 3 p.m. US Eastern. We're here on WBN for the next couple of hours and a bit longer elsewhere. Welcome to the show. And we have the returning Monika Schaefer tonight. We're going to be talking about women, lots of them on film and in the studio. And we're going to be talking, we're going to start off talking about suffragettes and suffragism. Is there such a word? I don't know. We're about to find out. And we got some good clips lined up for you in the show, which should get everybody's teeth on edge and brains whirring, I hope. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. It's a jolly old, cool, cold Thursday evening here. I've decided to have toothache again for some reason, but it's not playing up right now. So if you hear me shout out, "Ah!" in the middle of the show, you'll know it's struck back. I have no idea why. I'm cursed by the toothache gods. But it came back a couple of days ago. Always fun to let everybody know about such things. And somebody kindly gave me a cold the other day, so I sound slightly sniffly, but I don't think this is going to be too much of a problem for the next 2 or 3 hours as we roll through on things. As I said there in the intro, what I've tried to do today is to come with a slightly contentious title. It's not really, it's rather tame. How are we going to take the vote off of women? And if you are a woman and you're a bit cross about all this, and you might be, who knows, you probably understand that to some degree it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but there is a very, very serious point behind it, which is to do with our decline as a people. And this is not pointing the finger at women per se. It's pointing the finger at, well, what are we going to point it at? We're about to find out, I think, and hopefully we'll share a few bits of knowledge that we have, but I suspect we're probably going to be asking far more questions than we've got answers. I certainly feel like that. Anyway, I'm going to throw it over to the studio. Welcome to the show, chaps and chapesses. Monika, ladies first. How have you been since you were here the last couple of weeks?
I am doing very well. Thank you very much. I look forward to this discussion. It's rather a momentous discussion, and I've had a terrific last couple of weeks. I was away for a few days, went snowshoeing in more snow than you can imagine, and I've been doing well. Thank you so much.
You've been out in the snow?
Yes, lots of it. This little tiny hamlet that I went to where I have a friend whom I visited, the graders have piled the snow from the roads and the driveway. People have to do their own, but it's so high, it's like twice as high as you or me. These snow piles on every corner of everybody's lot. It's amazing.
All right, we haven't seen snow. I haven't seen snow since I was a young lad. Actually, that's not true. We're down here on the south coast, so we rarely get it. But we got some about 15 years ago. It's very exciting, particularly for my lads who were sort of infants at the time and had never seen it before. But that's it. It lasted 2 days and it disappeared. So we barely get it down here. It's far too warm and balmy and wet, really, most of the time. So, and how long will the snow last for? When will you be shoveling away your last piles of it? Does it go on for some time?
Well, not here where I am. I mean, I came back home. That was a 3-hour drive away, and where my friend lives is really in the snow belt. We had a lot less snow where I live, although it was beautiful, a beautiful snowpack. But the last few days have been so warm, and it even rained last night, and I just see little piles of snow here and there where we had shoveled it up. But mostly it's gone from the fields. So I'm kind of lamenting that, because I figure it should stay at least till the end of February. And in March, okay, that's fine if it disappears. But I do enjoy the winters. I really like Canadian real winter with snow and ice for skating, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And then when spring comes, you see, if it comes too early, it's a gray time because you don't have the leaves budding out yet. And in fact, they shouldn't bud out yet. Sometimes they get fooled if there's a really warm spell, and then they get fooled into budding out, and then we get another doozer of a deep frost, which can really set them back quite a lot. So then, we end up with gray and mud and for a while until maybe sometime in April, May, and then it really gets beautiful with all the new growth coming. So that's kind of the scene around here.
Oh, yours sounds so much more grandiose than ours does, although we've had a few hints of spring the last couple of days. And the really nice thing at the moment, I go walking at the end of the afternoon, and I'm going later and later because my body tells me to go when it's getting to a certain level of darkness, when I can feel the gloom coming in, and I keep looking at my watch and going, I'm going later and later, which is quite exciting. And then we're getting all the blackbirds singing, which is they're always a bit keen to get off. They can sense that the light's coming, so we're getting the little chirruping birds as the evening, as the last remaining rays of the wonderful sun set. So it's always a nice time of the year. It is quite exciting. I think we've got about a month to go before the clocks go forward. Yeah, forward, isn't it? To give us a little bit more sunlight. But I think for you guys over there, it's a little bit earlier. You always get more of everything, so it starts earlier for you. You do. I think your summers are about 8 months long, and ours are 7 or something like that. Yeah, on the summer times.
I have never met anybody, you might be the first, if indeed you like this time change twice a year, but I have never met anybody who enjoys changing the clocks twice a year. And I figure we should just stay on the standard time. And then you just do what you do whenever you do it, according to the daylight. And, when they first brought this thing called daylight savings time,
yes.
I mean, that's a deception right there, is it not?
It is. Yeah, it's incredibly vexing. It really is. It's very irritating. I don't know why they just don't set it to summertime and leave it, but there's always these implausible reasons that they offer up. I mean, were the people in the world all cross about the lack of light back in 1482 or something like that? I'm not aware that they were. So somebody invents clocks and now they start adjusting them all the time. I mean, I would have thought for airlines as well, it's a complete madness. You think about all these schedules that have to shift twice a year. And then even if we're going to do that, we don't even change at the same time as you guys. It's mad. Northern Hemisphere should all change at the same time, shouldn't it? Or am I just being completely tedious and boring and stuff like that?
No, you are absolutely right. And in fact, Canada used to be switching it more along the lines of when Europe would switch, and then we aligned ourselves with the Americans because they were doing the longer time on the summertime, and so the powers that be, they switched it to align with the Americans. But I vote for staying on the standard time, the winter time. That's just my vote, but that doesn't really matter now. I don't set an alarm these days anyway. But, for the school children, especially the teenagers, to get up earlier for school, that's actually kind of hard on them. I've read stuff and seen stuff about the biological clock of young people, especially in those teen years, that they actually do better to have a little extra sleep in the mornings. So anyway,
to just lie in for a long time, like big lazy oafs, as my parents used. Get out of bed, you lazy oaf, is what I was, you can't stay in bed all day, can't I? No, and all that kind of stuff. Oh, well, we've all got that. I'm spending more and more time sleeping recently. I think it's still that coming out of the winter thing. It's always that way. Anyway, that's a really good rundown of Canadian weather systems. I like that. And maybe we can have some time wars. Maybe we can get a big time war going, for people that want to change the clocks and people that don't. But it is a berserk. It's just another way of confusing us and knocking us slightly off beam, I think. Can't understand it at all.
I think so too.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
I agree.
Cool. Eric, how are things out there on the sunny, beautiful east side of England? How are things going for you?
Oh, they're excellent. But, of course, as it's Fockham Hall, we're 1 hour ahead anyway. So,
Yes.
But I'm old enough. Yeah. Oh, yes.
You're on European
summertime. Yes, we're summertime all year round. But the thing that gets me is that they did an experiment in the late 60s, early 70s, where they kept the clocks all the same all the time. And it was great because, I was very, very young at the time. But you get up and it would be dark when you went to school. Yeah. And then you'd have people didn't get depressed. But there's this strange campaign that started where they said that children are getting run over in the mornings because it's dark, but they didn't worry about them going home in the dark, which is a bit weird. So they worried about them in the mornings, but not in the evenings. And then they said that there was some school children that got killed in Wales when a bus careered off the road in the dark, in the darkness, and run them over. And many years later, there was a television show on that used to investigate things like this. And they went along to this place in Wales and they couldn't find a shred of evidence for it happening. It was invented. It never happened. Then there was a hidden hand involved in turning the clocks backwards and forwards. Now, who that hidden hand was, I don't know. But it was definitely a hidden hand that was up to it. So any guesses out there who wants all... And I think it might be something to do with money, because when they change the clocks round, it costs a lot of money, doesn't it? So someone's cashing it in somewhere.
It might be they can make use of this extra missing hour or this extra gained hour in some kind of way. Who would know?
Yes.
I can't see that the advantages would be offset by the disadvantages. I just don't see what the benefits would be compared to the... It's a big thorny issue. It is. It's the issue of our times. Pun intended. But
yeah.
Well, maybe. It's probably usually bankers anyway, isn't it? It's usually bankers.
It normally is, yes. But during World War II, they had double some of the time. And apparently, some of my parents told me, so they went 2 hours ahead because of production for workers and things like that. So, but I'd like it to be on summertime, on European time all the time. It'd be great because, all right, it's a bit dark in the mornings, but it'd be nice and light in the evenings, and much better.
I know. I just don't know why you just don't get up earlier. If we lived like bears, I'm not mean hibernating, although the winter hibernation looks more and more appealing the older I get. I'm beginning to think that these bears are onto a thing by, hunkering down for 5 or 6 months or however long it is. But if we just lived naturally by the light rhythms of the Earth. The flat Earth for those that like that sort of thing, the globe Earth for those that like that, whatever your proclivities are, maybe we'd all be better off. And then, you just get up later. But of course, much of this is to do with clockism, of course, with the requirements of industry to have you turning up and clocking in, which is all part of the regimentation and the management of your life, isn't it, to a great degree? So it seems to me that it is. Absolutely. Great. Okay. Eric, anyway, fantastic. Look at me, getting all my emphases wrong. Patrick, how are things in Wisconsin?
Oh, they're good. It's about 42 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius. I'm reminded of that Simon and Garfunkel song, Hazy Shade of Winter. All the snow's pretty much melted, except some patches.
Yeah.
But the maple sap isn't running in from our... tree, so I'm kind of wondering what's going on with that. It's not good. But
is it supposed to run at this time of year?
Well, usually when we get this kind of weather where it warms up, usually it starts flowing, but it hasn't in the last. But then again, it's only been a few days since the weather changed like this. Last week I think we were getting down to negative 25 Celsius, so we kind of jumped quite a bit in our temperature. And I was going to say about the daylight savings time, I think it used to be called wartime, and since they never declared an end to World War II, they never declared an end to using wartime, which is daylight savings time. The way I look at it and reckon it should be when the apex of the sun is at its highest peak. That should be noon, which would be standard time.
Yep.
Now, you can argue with me and say no, but I really think that should be the standard.
I'd like to argue with you because I like a good argument. But
Yeah, well,
are you saying, Patrick, that prior to the war, prior to say what, World War II or World War One, we didn't have
it was World War
summertime?
II. World War II that they called it wartime. I listened to those old broadcasts of the BBC and different places in America. They'd call it wartime, like Eastern wartime,
Right?
like Eastern American time.
Right.
And it meant daylight. Now they call it daylight savings time. That sounds a lot nicer, but they never really dropped it after World War II. They just kept it going.
I don't know. What are they like? They can't even get their finger out to sort that out. I don't know. They, the veritable they. All right, cool. Paul, are you here? Do you want to say anything, or are you just lurking and picking up signals and firing them out into the universe? Hi. How's the ice in the guttering, Paul? How's all the ice doing in the guttering?
Well, it's melting. The leaks have slowed way down. So I think we might be making headway. One thing I did want to mention is I wanted to thank you so very, very much for having a radio show on my birthday. I turned 18 today.
Did you?
So I'm very happy to be of the age of majority. Or I guess because it's 18 Celsius, I would say that's extra majority, but whatever.
Well, happy birthday to Paul. Well done. So you've got a great name as well. So, I think it's always good when people call Paul have a birthday. That's fantastic. Well done. Well done for arranging it on a Thursday. That's excellent.
It's average. yeah, it's quite good. I'm not suffering from Chinese water torture at the moment.
No,
and it's my birthday, so it's all good.
So does this mean you're old enough to go out and buy a beer now? Can you do that? Can you go and buy a beer?
No, I actually have cold snacks in the refrigerator. I'll be popping those open a little later on
during the show.
It's
lowering the tone around here. Cool, fantastic. Well, introductions all made. Welcome everyone to the studio and to tonight's wonderful topic. I think, anyway, I've been thinking about this actually on and off for years. There were loads of stuff I read about 10 or 12 years ago. And I just call this show "Women to Lose the Vote?" ? Not because I expect them to lose it, but it throws up all sorts of little questions. I just think it's a good place to start, really. Because it actually does naturally move into pretty heavy topics about where we're going as a civilization, if we still consider ourselves to be one, where we're going as with a Western man, that kind of thing. And Eric, I saw some comments of yours earlier today on Telegram about the early days of what the suffragettes. I don't want to stick on the suffragettes all night long because they're just the starting point. But some of the early goals of the suffragettes were not quite what necessarily everybody thinks. I saw you write something about that a little bit earlier today.
Yes, that's right. What's happened is the suffragette movement was actually started by men. It was Emily Pankhurst, I think it was her husband that started it. And it's been corrupted, our view of it, because there's two major things, and I won't go on too long about it. One is that in those days, and I'm talking about 1890s, 1880s, men sometimes had 2 votes or several votes, and they thought that the idea was if a woman, if their wife could get the vote, then that extends their power. So that was what was really behind it. And they said it would only be women of shall we say of the upper classes and the upper middle classes that would get the vote, not the working class. Then in the 60s, the communists corrupted our view of it to say that, they fought for all women to get the vote. No, they didn't. And the reason they gave women the vote in 1918 is this country was on the verge of a revolution at that time. So, but only women over the age of 30 were given the vote, and they had to own property. And it was only much later that every woman could get the vote. And so in 1918, women got the vote. in 1921, very strict gun laws came in with the 1920, I think it was 1920 Firearms Act came in. So a lot of changes happened in just after the First World War to, shall I say, offset a revolution, because men were coming back from the front line, realising they'd been conned, totally conned, and they were extremely angry, and they're extremely fit, the ones that weren't injured, and they knew exactly how to handle weapons, which was very worrying for the government at the time. So this idea that women, chain themselves to railings and things like that so that every woman could get the vote, I'm sorry, that myth has been peddled since the 1960s. Just have to look, when you look right into it, it was only some women could get the vote, not all women. So that's a corruption of the suffragette movement. I hope that I've actually, shall we say, that is, I could go on further about it, but I think that's about as much as I can waffle on about tonight.
No, it's good. It's really good. I'm trying to think about what years we're talking about. I mean, when I think of, is it Emmeline?
1890s.
Emmeline Pankhurst. What years
Emily
are we talking
Pankhurst.
about? Yeah.
1880s, 1890s, 1900s. There was that woman that threw herself under a racehorse.
Yeah, I remember that. That's what I was going to come round to. Yeah.
I'm not as old as you, so I don't remember it in my.
Oh, I was there. I was at the race. My horse came in actually. Each way bet 8-1.
Yes.
Brilliant. Yeah, we had a good day out that day. It was grand.
But, luckily, the horse was okay. I mean, the people were very worried about the horse, but it survived. I think.
Right.
She didn't have to be put down. No, seriously, they don't know whether she was mentally ill or not. So who knows?
Is that what's referred to as first wave feminism? I've seen these phrases. I'm going to be asking as many questions. It's not as if I'm knowledgeable about this, which is why I'm kind of really looking forward to it.
They were terrorists. They were early terrorists because they actually planted bombs in places. Seriously.
They wanted the vote that much?
They put votes. Seriously, they planted bombs in different places to go off, and quite a few of them, they were so badly done, they were found out, luckily, and they didn't injure anybody. But I'm not too sure about this. There may have been some injuries or deaths from these bombs, but they were actual terrorists. Believe it or not. If you look into it, they planted bombs.
Yeah, Paul. Yeah.
So over to you, Paul.
I think probably the reason... Hi, Eric. I think probably the reason that the vote changed was voting originally. I mean, way back when, that was property owners, people with a stake in the country, and they had ownership of part of the land. And then they were only allowed to vote. And then the women's vote, it was, like Eric said, only women of stature, women of that own property could vote. But between the 1900s and 1930, they were putting this whole de facto system together, and they knew that eventually nobody's vote would matter and nobody was going to truly own property. They were only going to have beneficial ownership of it through registration of their property deeds, warranty deeds, their vehicle titles, all that happy stuff. Mm-hmm. Nobody was actually going to own a lodium in any property, so they just opened the vote to everybody. Now, that being said, the vote really doesn't matter, because if it did, they wouldn't let you do it. So I really don't see what the big deal is.
Spot on.
I don't know.
Spot on. Absolutely spot on there. Yeah.
Well, because there's kind of there's a few little subtexts in this line, women to lose the vote, because it assumes that actually having it is something of value, which of course you've just said it isn't, and I would agree with you. I don't think it is. I mean, it's valuable to the would-be controllers, in the sense, I think we touched on this last week when we were talking about this common law stuff. Everybody thinks that they're participating in democracy by casting their vote every X years. 4 for you guys over there. It seems to be a permanent voting sort of thing. I think it's about 5 or 6 over here. Who cares, really? But that's part of the deception. Oh, I voted, therefore I'm participating in democracy, therefore I'm responsible for the outcome, or at least they'll jolly well try and make you responsible for it when all their decisions go bad, which is all the time, because all their decisions are bad, and so you get the blame for it, and so people end up being cowed. What?
I vote, therefore I am.
I think that's it.
Bullet.
Whereas the idea of qualified voters seems to make sense to me. I mean, is this me being a sort of elitist? Why would you wouldn't allow an idiot, not that there are any, of course, left these days, but you wouldn't allow somebody unqualified, a carpenter, for example, who would be brilliant working on your tables and things, but you wouldn't allow him to service your car engine if he just said he was a mechanic but knew nothing about it. In other words, qualifications are there to convince the customer that you're actually good at what you're doing. And is it possible? I hate to quote Winston Churchill. You know me, we don't like it. But the problem is he came out with all these tremendous aphorisms. One of them was, the argument for democracy seems good until you spend half an hour talking, I'm paraphrasing like mad, unless you spend half an hour talking to the average voter. And then you realise that it's doomed because people are and misinformed, of course, intentionally by the systems that are in place. So it's not, I mean, even that we've got the vote type thing is just a sort of Pyrrhic victory. Is that right? I think it is, really. It sort of seems to be so meaningful, but it isn't. I can understand why they were doing certain things back then, and I've read sort of essays and the like that suggest that this was kind of needed. I mean, I don't know. Although Eric knows I'm quite old, I actually wasn't a young man in the 1880s, so I just don't know how hard done by women were. Although, if you read of the plight of the poor in the cities, courtesy of Dickens and other writers, you can see that it was not a particularly pleasant life. It was incredibly tough and horrible. But then these weren't the people who were being targeted to acquire the vote, given what Eric's just said, which makes complete sense as well. So it's almost as if there's a genuine need for it in 100 years ago, but as we know, it's morphed into something far more deadly. And I do mean that. I think it's deadly what's been built upon, by this emancipation of women. Yeah, Monica.
I have really enjoyed listening to you guys. This has been so good. And that one sentence by the young Paul, I'll just distinguish the Pauls since he's having a birthday. If it really is your 18th birthday, I don't know if that was serious or not. But anyway, the young Paul, the one sentence you said that they were giving everybody the vote because they knew that in the end nobody's vote would count because they want us all without property, owning nothing, which is in today's age, we all know that phrase that, you will own nothing and you will be happy, not. And this is so true. But yes, that is the history. The vote used to belong to property owners, but I learned lots of new things just in listening to you guys describing some of the history of, the vote and when it was changed and who it was given to when and this kind of thing. And it was different in different places. I remember, I think it was in the 1980s, learning with like just great shock at that time that, the last canton to give the vote to women in Switzerland just gave, there was a canton in Switzerland who hadn't yet given the vote to women. And that was in the late 80s, I think. And I remember being so shocked because at that time that was just such a foreign concept to me that women didn't have the vote,
Yeah.
So anyway, when you were discussing this topic that you're going to focus on this, and I wanted to join you all, and I really gave this a lot of thought, this whole topic, because I'm telling you, being in on this discussion, it is almost as momentous for me as back in 2016 when I put that fateful video out on the internet, the one that got me in trouble, but this is not a topic I'll be going to jail for at all, but it is, I'm just saying that it is big, because as a woman, and I was born in 1959, and so I grew up at a time when, at that time, most mothers were at home. My mother was an at-home mother, didn't have outside work, and she raised a family of 5 children, and that was quite normal at that time. However, then I grew right into that era where the feminist movement just really, really seeped into our everyday consciousness, and it then began to really shape me. But I would say not as a child, but as a young adult. And I would say I made many life mistakes based on, the influences of the feminist movement in my life, as well as other influences, with all the lies and deceptions that we have at other times talked about. But the feminist movement, I would put that as one of the most destructive elements of, those who wish to destroy us. That tool, it's the Trojan horse, really. And how is this related to the whole topic at hand, women's vote? And I would say, Paul, that when you said, it's a good starting point, I was going to say the other way around, that, okay, it definitely is a good hook to bring us into this discussion, but I would want to say that we need to create a context for why would we even discuss something that I can't believe, 2 years ago I wouldn't have entered into this conversation. I would have thought it was absurd, but now I am entering into this conversation. I've, had more time to start to think about what has been done to us and the ramifications of, the whole feminist movement. And I guess that was, the suffragettes was, like you say, was that you were saying the first wave of feminism and all this stuff. But yeah, in my personal life, I would say I have come full circle to where I was as a child instinctually. Because as a child and well into my teen years, that's an artificial construct, by the way, from those who don't like us very much, this teenager concept, but that's an aside. But all through my childhood and youth, I wanted nothing more than to do exactly what my mother did, and that was to get married, have children, and be at home with my children. That is what I desired. And then it was, my life didn't quite turn out that way. And, it just took different directions, and I'm not going to get into, laying out all my personal mistakes and everything I did in my life, but that's not what this is about. But just to realize what influences I had suffered under, and I'm using that word as just that we all suffered under. I'm not saying, oh, poor me. No, we all had suffered under these influences, with the degenerative forces upon us. And when we were talking earlier about the daylight savings time, and I really liked your explanations. I didn't know that about the war thing, but to get us off balance and whatnot, and who is doing this to us? Perhaps it's the bankers. And I would say the same thing, of course, with the feminist movement. I know that you like to be careful about naming who this is, but we could just call them the bankers, or those who were kicked out of the temple even in the time of Jesus Christ. So those ones, the ones that impose usury on us, right? So yes, those ones. They are the ones who invented this very degenerative thing called feminism. And when we discuss this, it is extremely important for us to understand at the core of this that it is not a competition between men and women, which is what the feminist movement somehow instilled that notion into us, as was demonstrated by my nephew, who said to me, Monika, I'm so surprised that you're becoming this and that and the other thing. He used all these weaponized words that I never used those words. They were just weaponized words that he thought were associated with being a Holocaust denier or whatever that is, you know. And then he said, I'm so surprised you're anti-feminist. You're the one who stands to lose. And I thought about that afterwards. What? Stands to lose? So he obviously was raised to believe that it's a competition. Life is a competition between men and women. That is at the core of what has been done to us with this feminist movement, that we're competing with each other. And really, that is, well, I want to go in a million directions here right now with this discussion. It is just so critical and crucial. And I'm so happy to be here to discuss this, because really that is behind what we're, the hook is women to lose the vote, question mark. And most people will hear that and go and just they'll run for the hills, they'll shriek, they'll say, what? Are you kidding me? But we have to put this into this context of women and men, that they do have different roles in life, that they are different. We are not that's all equal like they tried to tell us. And in trying to tell us that we're all equal, they try to make us think that that's all about making us be fair with each other, or that this is supposed to be good for us. But in actual fact, it is the most divisive tactic. That's what they're doing. And so to divide us all up, and with the feminist movement, they say, oh, it's to raise women up to where men are. In the meantime, it's to divide us between the sexes and make us compete with each other, when in actual fact, it's not about one sex being higher than the other or lower than the other. It's about us fulfilling different roles. And this is a very natural thing, that we have different roles. The last time I checked, women can have babies and men can't, although they're trying to play havoc with that too these days, with the insanity of the tranny stuff and whatnot. But that's an absurdity that's just beyond the pale. I don't even know, we don't even need to go there. But the natural order, women have babies, women can nurture and breastfeed those babies. The natural role is for women to be in the home and raise the families. And it went all through my young adult years. I remember just having this message come at me from all around. You can't pinpoint where it comes from. It comes from all around, whether it's the movies, whether it's the just everything, the news cycles, the schooling, the university courses, everything. They're always defining us by, oh, what do you do for a living? What do you do? And thereby lowering, oh, you're just a housewife? You're just a housewife, implying that this is just sort of you don't need any intelligence, you don't need any skills, you don't need anything. Whereas in actual fact, that is a role that you become everything. You become, a doctor, a nurse, a nurturer, a care. You're everything, and it's the most important thing. It's not to be diminished, as in you're only a housewife, or it is unbelievable how that was done to us. And the other aspect about it, they tried to make the women think that they were somehow oppressed being in the home, somehow just oppressed and enslaved being in the home. And I can think of nothing more freeing than if your role is to take care and nurture and be the homemaker and the care, the carer for your children. How free you are. You can decide the course of your day. Oh, instead, it's much better to get out of that oppression and go to work and clock in, as you used that word earlier, Paul, to clock in and press that time button and then be away from your children, put them in a daycare, somebody else cares for them. Then you're a slave, and you're working. Then if they are trying to tell us, oh, you're being oppressed by the man, the husband, oh, but now you're going to go to work for some man in a factory, like the whole thing is absurd. Anyway, I've kind of talked enough for now, and I'll take a pause, but there's just some context to put out there. One more thing I'll say is that when we have this discussion about the vote for women, and I know this will come up, that, okay, ever since women got the vote, then things went downhill, and it's kind of, we have to be very careful not to be scapegoating women for things that have happened. It could be that these things happened, when women got the vote, because women tend to be bamboozled much more easily into, being all, what would you call it? Like just, oh yeah, we have to take care of everybody, and so now, we're going to feel sorry for all these other people. And women, I think, are more easily pulled into that that way of thinking, and so are going to be voting more, libtarded.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful not to scapegoat women, thereby deflecting from where the war is really at, and it's a war against our people, all our people. I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, spot on with everything. I mean, I think our roles are complementary when it works right.
Yes.
And I think we have a sense that it used to work right. I have more than a sense of it. I was part of it as a small boy in the 1960s. And my parents were slightly older than the parents of most of the people I went to school with. I don't know why. I always asked them. They said, we just wanted to wait a bit before we had children, which was slightly different for those days as well, because most people used to get married at 19 and 20 and be in the family way by 23, 24. And obviously we know from a biological point of view, women are ideally suited for childbirth. I think around about the age of 18 to 25 are the prime years for it. But we can just look at the data as well. Whatever we might think about all the aspects of its ruinous effects, we don't need to speculate too much, because if we just look at the birth rates and the reduction in the number of people in so-called stable marriages, at least this is what we are told, and I guess I have a sense that that's the case, then we see that this is the bitter fruit of this. That it's harnessed on something that was always there, that we were able to control properly through ethical, moral, civilized behavior, which we had in abundance. And this is, I think, to a great degree to do with controlling the sex drives of women and men. They have to be mastered. And if you look at the porn industry, that's designed to assist people to lose their mastery of that. And to give into more baser instincts, and to think that this is the high point of your life, is to hop in the sack with someone as many times as you possibly can, and this means your life will be great. And of course it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you might have a wild time in your 20s or something or whatever, but if you don't sort yourself out, that won't carry on, and then you end up with these cliches of the lone cat ladies in their 50s, 60s and 70s, bitter about things without any children, withering away. And see, this is the bitter fruit that comes down the line. It looks great when the party's on. Yay! Who wouldn't want to go to that? Well, are you mad? But if without some kind of ethical and moral guideline in there, a compass, which used to exist, it absolutely used to. This is why I suppose I tend to hark back to the Victorians, simply because they are viewed as this staid, completely sexually repressed people, which is not entirely true, of course, because if it were, we wouldn't be here. But I quite like that. I quite like the fact, this is just my personal sort of view at the moment, that people were supposedly repressed or were focused on something, their duty, as it were, to the nation. And that starts with your duty to the family. And you can't have a family, it seems to me, without a male and a female coming together in the bonds of love, ideally. You hope for that. And in most cases, that is the case, not just the bonds of lust. And developing the space in which you can raise children, the aim of which is to make them better than their parents in every regard. So it's a bit of a highfalutin thing to say, because I know many people don't have the resources to do that. And also there's this thing about reproduction cycles as a tribe, as it were. Our tribe tends to want to really nurture children as best it can, and so that's another part of this reduction in the scope and health of families, or family life, certainly here, which is economically the vice has been on for a long time, and it's tightening with every single day, all sorts of things, so that young people think, I can't afford a house, we've both got to go out and work, how are we supposed to get together? The goal of becoming the head of my own family is shrinking as an option in my life because of all these other pressures which didn't exist 120 years ago, because we've mentioned it here before. A farmhand over here without any credit cards or a bank loan could go out and work and support his wife and his 2 children, and they all ate okay, right? They just did. I don't think that's true these days. I keep hearing stories of everybody's on sort of like government welfare, which of course was looked down upon, but they've designed the system to move over to that. So this is not at the heart of what we're talking about, but these are the end results at the moment. These are the symptoms of a very strong disease in the heart of it, I think. So, and the whole... Yeah, the whole, what is it? I know it's opening a can of worms is one analogy, but I think is the camel got its nose under the tent and it's just been coming in ever since, you know? And you go, oh yeah, well, a little bit of this and it's okay. And then we had mini skirts in the 60s and all these things, which are great fun. I'm not a prude. That's not what I'm saying. But you see an ulterior motive with all of this stuff. It's to lower the kind of sexual restraint, which is... Oh, we'll come to this later on in some clips I've got, which it appears to be absolutely vital if you want to build a civilization. If there's no sexual restraint or self-mastery in that department, you're done for, because it just becomes a sort of basically a knocking shop for the whole country. And that's kind of where it's going. You can see there's something very low quality and low grade, I think, he said as a middle-aged fuddy-duddy, about the nature of the bulk of the so-called relationships, particularly like the ones that are paraded on TV these days, you know, in the soaps and stuff. They're just programming that makes life even worse for the people that consume it. So...
all those movements, and spot on, Paul. I'm sitting here nodding vigorously. I know you can't see that, but I'm telling you.
I can feel the waft all the way from Canada with all that nodding motion, Monica.
Anyway, all these movements that, what you just described, some of them, we thought they were just organic. You know, we just thought these things were just natural and normal to happen with, you know, youthful rebelliousness and this and that. But no, they were driven, the movements to, first of all, the styles and clothing to become a little bit less modest, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And then the drive to, the free love movement, that whole thing, you know, just sex with anyone, that's just fine. So there goes the restraint, you know, and that we just thought, that's just normal, that young people, you know, just normal. Well, no, it was driven. These things were I guess social engineering was at play that we weren't aware of at the time. At least I wasn't.
Me neither.
Aware, yeah. And it was all designed to lower our fertility rate. And also we were guilted into that, you know, with the Paul Ehrlich, his book with the population bomb. And that was of that certain group of people that are also the bankers, right? And it was to make us conscientious people think, oh my goodness, we better have less children. Meanwhile, then you go fast forward a few decades and, we need workers. We have to bring them in from other countries, from the third world. We need these workers, right? So that was all by design. Little did we know that there was all this engineering going on behind the scenes. And we're kind of broadening out the scope here, but then back to the whole thing about families and women and men and their roles. And, you know, if you convince women at that certain age when they're 18, 19, 20 that really they got to get a career, they got to do this and do that, and they're just as good as men, implying that if they were staying home having children, they're not just as good as men, right? There's always that implication. So you're driving these women into getting their careers. Well, then you're going to pass by that ideal fertile time of her life. Mm-hmm. Yes, women can have children still in their 30s. I mean, I did. I have one child, and I was a mature mother, you could say, and I knew when I was giving birth to her that, this would have been easier 10 years earlier. I can tell you that. But anyway, like I said earlier, my life turned out very differently from what my childhood dream was, and that was to be an at-home mom and raise children. And I remember thinking to myself that divorce is not in my vocabulary. It is not even anywhere near my vocabulary. Okay, later that changed, right? But it's just so many influences, and I have, you know, forgiven myself for some of the errors I made, but this is, I have looked and thought deeply about these subjects that we're talking about today, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Great stuff. No, really good stuff. Eric, Paul, Patrick, any comments?
Hello? Is it not?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah,
that's it, yes. I think that Monica is spot on about these social engineers. because it's like what I was saying the other night. For example, now I've got no interest in football at all, but remember what we were saying, that there's a referee that lives opposite where I live, and he's getting on a bit now, and he said in the early 60s, all the pamphlets showed there was friendship between rival teams. You know, we welcome our friends over from wherever to play, please welcome them, and everything was fine. Then suddenly they turned it round about the mid-60s to an aggressive way. You know, our bitter rivals will be along today, and let's give them hell on the football pitch and things like that. And then the violence started. So it's all socially engineered. And you look at these soaps, they are all social engineering. I mean, over here, Coronation Street started, I think it was in 1959, all to do with social engineering. And people follow these and believe that's how you're supposed to live. And there was a thing that the Labour Party had in the 60s called the Permissive Society. Did you have that over in Canada, Monica, and Patrick in America? The Permissive Society, big talk about it?
Are you talking about, is that name of a TV show, or do you mean
No. It was nothing to do with television. What it was there was a party political thing of how they were making it easy to get a divorce.
Oh, yes, yes,
things
absolutely.
like that. It was called the Permissive Society.
In fact,
I don't know whether it's called...
child rearing too, you know, the permissive
Yes.
child rearing, which then the pendulum swung the other way into hyper control and all this stuff. But the permissive child rearing was basically to let your children do anything they want, like bring their boyfriend home and or the girlfriend home and right under your roof to sleep with and this kind of thing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, the peak of that was in like 1969, the sexual revolution with Woodstock, a big concert in Woodstock, New York City, or near New York.
Well, that was the big advert for it, wasn't it? The big promotion
free
campaign.
love.
Take all your clothes off, run around in the field, smoke pot. It's all going to turn out great. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was something about tripping out or something, wasn't it? Yes. But I think that also they had free expression schools as well. And what that was is they didn't discipline the child. If the kid wanted to go absolutely do lally, they just let it. And I believe we've got the results of that in positions of power today. Because when you look at these people, look at the minister here, he's not right in the head. I don't know what childhood he had, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if he had a free expression childhood where, I was brought up Victorian strict. And if I stepped out of line, I'd get a clap round the ear, and that would be it. You know, I wouldn't step out of line. And I'd get a clap round the ear, not only from my dad, but I'd get it from my mum and my sister, who was much older than me. So, you know, it put me in line. But the thing is, there's a generation that the parents just did not discipline their children at all. And I've had this from neighbours from hell, where you say, Shimmy, your kids are driving me mad. And they say, well, what can I do about it? Well, you're the parent, aren't you? Yeah, but what can I do about it? Because the kids are just not being told right from wrong. They're just finding out for themselves. And that was all from, I think it was Spock. Not as in Star Trek, but that Dr. Spock.
Dr. Spock.
And apparently, I don't know how true this is. I don't think it is true. Someone told me that Spock in Star Trek is a kind of taking the rise out of Dr. Spock. I don't know. I doubt it. But, you know, with no expressions and things like that. But people are reading these books by these loonies that have never built children up. And people have been bringing children up for thousands of years. And suddenly, look what we've got now. We've got the results, as I say, of that.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, Monica, I'm born a year after, I'm 1960, so I reckon we had a similar sort of cultural overlay taking place. I felt as though my parents were from the old world, but I was surrounded by a lot of younger parents of my friends who were from the new one, as it were, and they were a lot younger. These were people born, I guess, after the war, parents in their mid to late 20s when in the early 70s. That's when they were, and my friends were, you know, obviously their sons and daughters and stuff like that. And there's the whole culture forces you. This is, you know, we are a herd animal. You got to and you don't even realize it's going on. You've got to fit in. You can't survive otherwise, and you don't want to be pushed out of your peer group and all this sort of stuff. So you can't even see these things. It's you know, we mentioned it here before. It's the fish in water. You don't even realize that you are a fish in water. It takes a long time for you to kind of understand the medium in which you've been floating around most of your life and to see it for what it is. I think it's resulted in arrested development, of which I include myself. I'm quite serious. I was talking to someone about it the other day. It's as if we take forever to grow up. Mm-hmm. I don't know what... I felt like that all the time. I thought, am I just going to be a permanent juvenile in certain tastes and emotional reactions to things? I think I might be doomed that way. Not that I'm trying to be immature here all the time, although sometimes it's inescapable, right? But there's definitely something about that.
Paul,
yeah.
Did you experience conflicts with your parents due to what we would now recognize as this social engineering of our generation after, you know, our parents, yours and mine, were of the older generation who still did have those, you know, strict values and morals and ethical guidelines and how to be and how to then subsequently raise a family like we did. Alfred and I have talked about this. In fact, one of the broadcasts we did together on my show on Republic Broadcasting Network was about that. Like, what are some of the things that we fought with our parents about that we now realize they were right about? Did you experience that?
I didn't really. No, I mean, I think I had a friend who used to literally have fights with his father in the garden. And they would have stand-up fights. They just couldn't agree on anything. He was pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable to his father. He was quite a strict disciplinarian and didn't take too kindly to it. And I remember he would come to school and tell us, oh yeah, I was out in the garden. Me and my dad were actually hitting one another with a lot of it. Because we'd find this very amusing. Although there was a bit, I'd go off and think, that's very bad. It never came to that. My parents would have been classed as old-fashioned. And I was awkward about it at first. I thought, why are my mum and dad different to all these other parents? So at the time, they didn't appear to be cool. In retrospect, they actually were, right? I think the old-fashioned values are the coolest values you can have. They're the ones where you're really much more in control. And they gave me a lot of free rein as I grew up. But I was also overwhelmed by girls. I don't mean they were chasing me, although of course they did, Monica. You know, it's just that's the way it was.
That's what I totally thought they did.
They did, but I didn't know what to do with them. What are they for? You know, when you're 17 and 18, I'm serious. So I went to an all-boys school. I was just much more interested in reading history and literature and stuff like that. And go, what's all this? And then they all wanted to listen to disco music, and that was just a complete no-no. I just couldn't even tolerate any of that nonsense. And then,
good for you.
You know, and the girls in the group that I ran with, let's go to a nightclub and dance. I went to one twice. I left on both occasions after 20 minutes. I couldn't abide it. And they said, why do you go home? I said, look, even if I was to spot an attractive young lady, I didn't speak like that at the time, of course, but if I was to spot or see an attractive young lady, I was very unsure of them because I didn't know what they were going to sound like. You can't hear anybody in those places. Do I sound like an old fart or what? But I actually felt like one and was quite pleased about it. And in fact, I went back up there to see some old friend at somebody's 60th about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years back. And one of the girls that was part of this group, they're all married and settled down and seemed to be reasonably competent. I didn't bother prying because I've not been up there for like 40 years, but it was a really fun sort of night out. And she came up to me, she said, I always liked it that way that you used to just leave and go home. I said, really? She said, yeah, it just seemed that you really knew what you were doing. I said, well, I didn't, but I knew that I didn't want to be there. It's not that I didn't like the people, I just didn't want to be doing that thing. I found it goofy and insincere and a bit daft, to be quite honest. And when I look back when I look back at my mum and dad took photographs in these tea rooms with all their pals. When they first met, they met in these tea rooms after the war, the Astoria tea rooms in Leeds, in Yorkshire, okay? And they took photographs. Someone obviously had a camera, and they'd taken half a dozen of these things in black and white, with the edges all curled up, because that was the way photographs were those days. And I remember looking at them later on in life thinking, wow, everybody's so sharply dressed. No one was drinking booze. They were all drinking tea. They wanted to dance, and all the men were holding the ladies round the waist. These things, these are symptoms of quality in civilization, and we don't. So look at what dancing morphed into. It morphed into this egotistical thing where I'm strutting my stuff, really, like John Revolting in that thing, which we, as lads, that film, what was it, Saturday Night Fever, we used to just fall about laughing at that. Oh, me, we just thought it was the most hilarious, noncy bit of junk we ever saw in our lives. We thought it was pathetic. All the girls, they're all in love with John Travolta, which of course made us laugh even more. We thought it was just hilarious. Completely nincompoop stuff. So, but of course I couldn't go ballroom dancing back then, and I wouldn't have done, and I didn't know how to do it. But there's something in it. It's why I mention these sorts of things throughout the show regularly and go back to them. It's not some sort of nostalgia for something I had. It's a yearning for something that I think we all need, because it's a hallmark of graceful, dignified, strong people. And that's what we've currently moved away from big time, courtesy of these social engineering projects that we're talking about. Anyway, we're just at halfway through the show. And I'm going to take a ludicrous interlude now, if I can just dig it up. Where is it? Because normally we play a song here. If I can just find it. Where has it gone? Dum, 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 dum. I will have it here somewhere. Have you heard of a chap called Jack Hodges? I thought I'd pick out something that was very old. We played a song the other week from 1921. And this is not from 1921, but Eric, this is specially for you, this song, right?
That's very kind.
It is. When I heard this song, I immediately thought of you. You'll know why. Okay, it's very quaint and odd and oldie-worldy. It's from 1933. It's by somebody called Jack Hodges, okay? And it's called The Raspberry King. And you will understand why when I play it. This is 3 minutes. We'll be back after... See? He's off already. We'll be back. A slight change of pace to lighten the mood. Then we're going to go into some even chunkier stuff after the break. Back after this.
In a little town where I belong, there's a most accomplished fellow. He's the leader of the village choir, and his voice is warm and mellow. He drives a fruit cart around the street, and everybody knows it. He doesn't sing or rave about his fruit, he simply blows it. He's doing it all day long. It's better than any song. Though it isn't very pretty, you've got to admit it's cute. So all together let it go. Eat more fruit. It's certainly come to stay. It's a treat to hear him say, hey, fruits in season, plenty berries, apples, plums, and the old raspberries. Everything is fresh today. Every Friday night when work is done, he never wastes a minute. To the village hall he hurries round, where he sings just like a linnet. To hear him blow a melody, it's great, you can't deny it. And if you've nothing else to do, I'd like you all to try it. Get ready and do it now. It's easy when you know how. Though it isn't very pretty, you've got to admit it's cute. So all together let it go. Eat more fruit. It's certainly come to stay. It's a treat to hear him say, hey, don't he laugh so far, me radon. Everything is fresh today. certainly come to stay. It's a treat to hear him say, hey, fruits in season plenty there is, apples, plums, and the old raspberries. Everything is special day.
And they don't write them like that anymore.
No, Spike Milligan did a send-up of that. Go onto YouTube and put Spike Milligan eat more fruit. You'll be off your seat with laughter.
I've seen it, and I went off and hunted down the original recording. And honestly, they don't write songs about raspberries anymore, do they? And where the world is the poorer for it. And also, it reminds me of like those Monty Python songs where they all stand around as a barbershop quartet and sing something very formally, but with very lewd lyrics. And I quite like that a lot. So, I thought you might quite like that, Eric. Yes, absolutely brilliant.
Oh, very much so. Thank you so much for playing that. I really enjoyed it. I was almost off a seat with laughter. But it's good. It's brilliant.
It's good. I don't want anybody to accuse us of playing modern popular music. We don't want to do that round here. We're trying to find things pre-1940 all the time. I don't know why. It is good. It's fun, actually.
But my granddad, he was a blind greengrocer. Unfortunately, he died on my father's side. He died about 2 or 3 years before I was born. But he told my father, he reckoned that all the problems with the country started from dance halls because I come from a long line of male non-dancers, you see. My father would never dance with my mother, and I'm a non-dancer as well. My feet are firmly on the ground. And as for disco music, it looks like someone's got Savita's dance. I mean, what is it about discos? I hate them. I think they're horrible. And I did when I was in my teens. Couldn't stand it. I'm glad there was somebody else that don't like it either.
Oh, no, it's not manly. I just never liked it. I just thought it was not manly. It's as simple as that. So not interested at all. And of course, the thing interesting about ballroom dancing, you could lay the same accusation, particularly when you see them, they're all floridated up on TV with all those preening around with their perfume and stuff. My dad used to laugh like mad. But when you see normal people just doing it, there's something great about it. I just think there is, because it's not even about the dancing. It's about, again, it's like a good marriage. You have to serve your partner when you've got your hand around her waist, and you have to do that because you don't want to stand on the dear lady's toes. And it used to happen, of course, much to the end of the relationship, almost immediately, I suppose.
Yeah. Ballroom dancing is absolutely the greatest thing, and you're absolutely right. It is so a wonderful thing that couples can do together, and I think that if a couple actually is a good dancing couple, like with ballroom dancing, it absolutely strengthens their relationship, their marriage, everything. There are so many components to it. There's the physical together with the music, that the vibrations of that, but there is this role too for the men and women. Back to this thing about men's and women's role, and it is encapsulated in the ballroom dance, where the man leads and the woman must be led, and it is, when done well, I'm telling you, it is just absolutely magnificent to behold, or if you are lucky enough to have a good dance partner to be involved in. Back to you.
No, I love. You see, although we're talking about something like dancing, we're touching on something else, something really important that's really fundamental to us as people. Paul, you were saying something.
Well, when it's done well, it's amazing to see, but when it's done very poorly, it's hilarious. So they've got both ends of the spectrum.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It can be very hilarious. It can. In fact, some of the best comedy sketches are people completely cocking up ballroom dancing. It's because you're striving to actually create something beautiful, and most of us actually can't. Or intermittently, maybe 2 or 3 times in your life you might do it. But most of us are moderately skilled in that department, particularly given the way that we've been raised. Right. You know, and you're absolutely spot on.
I was dragged along to dancing classes.
Not everybody.
Not everybody, no.
Well, I was dragged along to dancing classes by a girlfriend who later became my ex, And when I told my dad that I was being dragged along to dancing classes, he said, "You're not one of them, son, are you? I mean, you're not," because he always thought that dancing was for women and puffs and nothing in between. So only puffs danced, you see. So I got dragged along to this dance class, and we danced to a record. I've never heard of it before, because I asked her, and it's called "Get Off My Bloody Foot." Does anybody else know that record? I've just never heard of it before.
I was never taken ballroom dancing, Eric. It's one of the big gaps in my life. I never was.
She said that dancing with me was like dancing with a Panzer tank with a dodgy gearbox. She said, "I've got no sense of direction whatsoever."
There's a girl with some verbal imagination. I quite like the sound of this lass. She sounds grand to me. She really
I'm a bit
does.
flat-footed as well, which doesn't help me.
The thing is, not everyone can be Fred Astaire. But then again, I think he was given entirely too much credit, because Ginger Rogers had to do everything he did backwards and in heels. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it takes two to tango, as they say, really. Actually, my mum and dad used to have disputes over dancers. My mum loved Gene Kelly and my father loved Fred Astaire. It was the only point of contention that I can ever remember. It never came to a sort of vicious argument about it. But my dad would just go, "No, I'm a Fred Astaire man, really." And my mum would go, "Oh, he's too slow." And she wanted all that dynamic jumping around by Gene Kelly in the rain and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Great times. Really, really good stuff, actually. I think it's just worth reminding ourselves of this, because it's actually not that long ago. Everything has its era, and I guess that one has definitely gone. But it's this thing about the dancing. And, you know, what you were saying, Monica, it's a very refined thing, and it's a high tide watermark in your life if you ever get to do it. I do think, Eric, like I was saying, the Fockham Hall Festival should have the Foxtrot, the Fockham Foxtrot or something. I don't know what that is. I know it's a dance. Yeah.
Well, someone in chat has suggested that what you've just played, was it? This must be the Fockham Hall National Anthem. Well, I think it should be. I think. Can you imagine? We could all stand and salute to that. I think. I think that'd be quite good, actually.
The Raspberry King. Yeah, it's a tremendous song.
Yes,
absolutely. Right. I'm gonna change pace a bit. We're gonna go into something a little bit more serious now. I don't know if he's still producing videos. I don't know if you've ever come across him. An American chap, very softly spoken, quickly spoken, and very articulate. You're about to hear him. Who went under the name, probably still does, of Black Pigeon. Black Pigeon Speaks, or Talks, I think it was. And about 2015 or 16, he did a video called, brace yourselves, "Why Women Destroy Nations." Okay, and I'm not going to play the whole 18 minutes because it would absorb us and we'd go somewhere else, but I'll put the link into chat for those that want to go off and listen to it. But I've pulled a few clips from it. The first one's 4 minutes long. It's quite chunky, this, but it lays out the groundwork. And I think the other week I mentioned this is where I found out about it. This English chap called J.D. Unwin, who wrote this book, Sex and Culture, and his findings are very serious. They are. There's definitely a serious side to this. We know that we're dealing with a serious thing. That's why we have to have some silly Raspberry King music every now and again to alleviate the tension. But this clip's 4 minutes long, so I'm going to play it, and your responses afterwards should prove to be quite interesting, I think.
And in a democratic society, they vote their biological imperative. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, recent genetic research has shown that before the modern era, 80% of women managed to reproduce while only 40% of men did. The obvious conclusion from this is that a few top men had access to multiple women while the bottom 60% of men had no mating prospects at all. Women clearly didn't mind sharing the top man with a dozen other women, ultimately deciding that being one of many women sharing a man who leads was still more preferable than having the undivided attention of a man who serves. Commenting on this, Roy Baumeister, a prominent social psychologist who teaches at Florida State University, had this to say: "It would be shocking if these vastly different reproductive odds for men and women failed to produce some personality differences." He went on, "For women, the optimal thing to do is to go along with the crowd, be nice, play it safe. The odds are good that a man will come along and offer sex and you'll be able to have babies. All that matters is choosing the best offer. We're descended from women who played it safe." For men, the outlook was radically different. If you go along with the crowd and play it safe, the odds are you won't have children. Most men who ever lived did not have any descendants who are alive today. Their lines were dead ends. Hence, it was necessary to take chances, try new things, be creative, explore other possibilities. Many societies, including the West, long ago devised a simple plan to stop the inherent infighting that occurs because a large majority of men in the in-group don't have sexual access to women or the ability to reproduce legitimate children. The entire basis of Western society was the male agreement to keep only one woman in public, so that every male has near equal chance at reproduction. It's for this reason that organized and advanced civilizations have always needed to agree on the equitable distribution of women so as to incentivize its men to produce and have a stake in the society's health and security. But this, like other cultural arrangements that held the West together for centuries, is breaking down and can be observed in something as basic as the fact there are no Western countries that are even at replacement levels in their birth rates. This again can be laid at the feet of loosening of sexual morality and the dating habits of young women. Colloquially called the 80-20 rule, what it basically means is that the vast majority, the 80%, are sexually pursuing the top 20% of men. This is highly damaging to the formation of monogamous couples and the successful formation of families, and the children that will be the next generation of any given country. And we'll be talking about this more later in the video, but if you're interested, see Google for more information on this. Also, one thing to understand is that female psychology has always been about adaptation. In our tribal past, if women of conquered tribes didn't submit to their new masters, they faced death along with their husbands, brothers, sons, fathers. Even today, many women seek out aggressive men, whether consciously or not, as it seems that this psychology has been ground into women after countless years of our species' evolution. That means criminals, gangsters, and mass murderers are always going to be more attractive to women than hard-working, honest men. They always have been, they always will be. Think of how many women throw themselves at drug dealers versus, for example, math teachers. Sexual attraction is based on this reality for many women, regardless of whether they admit it or not. And the feminization of men in the West, adhering to the repetitive and decades-long diatribe that vilifies anything and all things masculine, are no longer, for many women, attractive potential mates. Especially for women in their critical prime childhood-bearing years. But I do add, this may and does change for many with age. The culture of the sensitive man, the emotional man, the compassionate man is at odds with what women are biologically predisposed to desire.
So quite a lot in that. I don't expect you to remember it all because it's packed with engaging, let's call it that, engaging points, which we may at first hearing not necessarily agree or even disagree with. The one that leapt out at me, well, yeah, it's brilliant stuff. The one that really leapt out at me is only 40% of men ever reproduced.
That I had no idea.
Staggering, isn't it? Absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
I suppose many got slaughtered in wars before they even got round to doing that. I know that in ancient Greece, certainly in Sparta, you weren't allowed to go into the army until you got a son. They wouldn't let you in. That was purely for logistical reasons. No army left. You keep going. If you were to go off and get beat, where's the next army going to come from? And of course, they wanted the fittest warriors to produce the fittest sons who were going to be the best warriors in the subsequent generation. But he unpacks in just those 4 minutes. There's so much stuff. There's so much in it.
I'll just give you a story that illustrates what he said about women desiring masculine men, strong men, and all that. It was when I was in prison, and I was asking these German women, this is in prison in Germany, and, you know, very Aryan-looking German women, and I wanted to share something with them in English, and I asked each of them, do you speak English? Oh, yes, of course. I go with a man from Morocco, and we speak English together. That's how we communicate. The next one, oh, yes, of course. I go with a man from Turkey. We communicate in English together. And then I just looked at them sideways. I said, what's wrong with German men? Because it was completely off topic of what we were talking about, but I just said that. What's wrong with German men? And did they ever give me an earful about that they wanted masculine men? And they wanted to feel protected. They
Yep.
did not want a man that was going to say how high when they say jump or something to that effect. And then we had a nice discussion, because these things were not new ideas to me. But then we had a nice discussion after I said, you do know that the weakness currently visible in German men is not genetic, right? This is through social engineering and decades of this re-education program and programming, basically. And they did know. They understood that. But they said, but we want masculine men here and now. I mean, not here in jail, but you know what I mean? Just
Yes.
they're, so that was the story that illustrates that. And what do we see in all the adverts or the movies? We see very clumsy, weak white men, while we see very masculine, dark men everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do. And I mean, I grew up with very masculine men when I was young, but not as masculine as they were in the 1930s. I'm quite clear about that. And it's something to do with self-discipline and restraint. And also, I suppose, back then, the hardships of life earlier on. This is when I was saying earlier, about feeling like I'm undergoing permanent adolescent arrested development with things. I think there's definitely an aspect of that. We've had an awful lot of fun, but we're not as strong, and it's a concern. You can feel it in a way. So, yeah, I mean, that whole thing of females wanting the rebel, wanting the slight edgy maniac, it's absolutely true. I've heard...
And to feel protected. Feel protected. Yes.
Well, they want to know you would beat off anybody, beat them up if things go out of hand. And in fact, women, I noticed when I've been in situations like that, mainly in my youth, 3 or 4 times in pubs and things, the women would get very excited about that in all sorts of ways. I couldn't have analysed it and told you at the time, but looking back on it, I remember these sorts of moments very much. There's a great deal of natural sort of vital female energy comes into the whole scenario, and of course they want to defend their man, and there's all sorts of stuff goes on like that, and we're not this sophisticated creature all the time that we think we are, thankfully. But of course we've definitely been softened up, and the advertising bombardment is a key part of that. It really is. It's everywhere you look. The agreement has been set for the soft, sensitive man who's basically a complete waste of space. Particularly these ones that are continually emoting with feminism and want to back it up. You just go, what? What are you talking about? Because it doesn't produce any strong relationships. If it did, I'd be all for it, but it clearly doesn't, because it's not. Nature doesn't want it that way. We're anchored into...
You just hit on a very important point about, having this sensitive man type being pushed. And in the feminist movement, pushing that narrative for women to be attracted to the man who would be, the soft, sensitive type. And if he wasn't, then he wasn't any good. But that's part of it, isn't it, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
That it's pushing that narrative further to try to artificially create what should the woman be attracted to, and that it doesn't work out in the end.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, I'm not making an argument for the so-called mythical Philistine bloke, the great brute. I mean, they do exist. I've worked with brutes, 2 or 3 that I can think of, who were unflinchingly so male, it's just almost, it was difficult to be around them. I've often thought that, males are basically 80% masculine and 20% feminine, and it's the opposite for women. This is just me making stuff up, right? I thought there's got to be a bit of the other side in you, so that you can see the feminine and so that you can see the masculine. Because someone who is completely insensitive to things, which of course I suppose is the archetypical picture of the dense male, is a bore. And they are, it's like, what would you call it? A jock, a sports jock, just continually droning on and drinking beer all the time. That's how it got to be portrayed. I don't necessarily remember it being like that 100 years ago, but that's certainly the way it ended up being portrayed in popular culture. It's a challenge, because the more you look at it, the more you see that every single aspect of the sort of behavior patterns that we are subjected to, courtesy of the TV, are reinforcing these stereotypes. And it's monkey see, monkey do. There's no point blaming people for that because we're all like that. The only difference is you suddenly go, hang on, I'm being had. Some of us just go, I'm being had here. This isn't right. There's an instinct that hopefully kicks in. We want it to kick in with everybody, but it doesn't always do that. So I think his points are brilliant. I mean, the other point, that women basically in ancient tribal situations, and maybe we're still in one, just with the veneer of civilization, over it, if things went bad for the tribe, they would be raped and or killed. Therefore, it's understandable why they would develop certain survival behaviors to deal with that, which would be being overcome by the enemies purely to live. I completely understand that. And of course, it's developed, that conversation that you were just mentioning, that's an aspect of it, that the tough outsider will get the women, irrespective of what race they are. And this is, it's worth looking at this purely because we know that our race is being chewed up, and this is a part of it. It really is.
Something that my neighbour said, which was quite interesting, she said to me, if you're looking for a partner, she said, wear a suit. She said, women will always fall for a suit. She said, because it's like a uniform. And it shows masculinity. And she had a good point. And
self-discipline,
how many people...
Isn't it self-discipline?
Yes,
Isn't that why...
That's right.
Military uniforms have the same effect. It says a man of vigour and self-control who can at times be uncontrolled. And I want that as well.
Well, there's a policeman who's moved away now. He used to live opposite me. And he said that he was on Palace Guard police, and he said that you could be Quasimodo. He said, and women would be all over you in a uniform. And he noticed it. He says, as a mate of his, who was absolutely, he said, one of the most ugliest blokes you could ever wish to meet, yet women are all over him, and he had his uniform on. He said it's quite amazing.
Does the Fockham haberdashery sell uniforms, Eric? I might need to order one.
Yes, it's funny you should say that. But I'll tell you something else I've noticed. What you're saying about immaturity. Now, you go to one of these, I don't like groups and clubs and things like that, but you go to one of these truth movements, the people are often very, very immature because... as you gain wisdom, you judge people's character for yourself and not rely upon what other people tell you. Mm-hmm. Children always rely upon what other people tell them. And I found that not only do they become cults, these organisations, but the people are extremely immature, very immature. And I think the reason why is because they were spoilt kids. And this is a big trouble because I think in the last, 50, 60 years, people have been brought up more spoiled. And my parents used to say that after World War II, people would say, my kids are going to have what I never had. And he said, and my dad said, they've actually reared a spoilt generation.
I know, but I don't know how you actually would sort of divert that. It's completely understandable. If you've just been through hell and back and you're going to have children, you are going to be, I've just seen a lot of life blown apart in front of me. It's not going to happen to my family no matter what. And you would go over the top. I often felt that my dad protected us too much. He used to clean my shoes as I was getting older, and I used to have little arguments with him about it. Right, he wanted to do it.
My dad,
and I said, Dad, can I do that? This is when I'm 7, 8, 9. I wanted to polish the shoes. He said, no, I do it quicker and better. I said, yeah, but I want to do it. I wanted to learn how to get covered in polish and cock it up,
Oh, my dad was an angel. Yeah. My dad was an absolute angel. He'd wait on your hand and foot.
Yeah, my dad did too. Mate. So that's part of it. They both come out of the war. Yeah. They do. I'm not saying it's necessarily just of a war generation, but my dad was like that. It was like he was the most helpful, contributive guy, and he was still masculine because I mentioned the other week, he used to come home and he'd say that he'd hit people at work. He didn't do it that often. And, he'd hang around with my uncles. They'd go to see Leeds United football matches. And, of course, we were the most polite football team in the world in the late 60s and early 70s, which is when my dad went. Of course, I'm mocking. But all those sorts of things. So that element was always there. I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. I mean, we're building civilization to try and improve the quality of life. And one of the things to guard for is raising soft children. And I always thought of myself as being softer than my dad. by temperament, by decision, all of these things, always.
Yeah.
And maybe he thought that with regards to his dad. I don't know. Maybe this is a continual, you should have seen the guys in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo. They were made out of nails. Well, I think they probably were in comparison to us, hearts of pig iron. You don't know where it all, you look at some of the things that they did. Oh, we'll just get in a boat and go to Antarctica with a pair of mittens and some long johns on and they go. Because they just would do that. We can possibly do that. I'll get frostbite. And of course, I don't want to go and get frostbite. I'm just drawing it up as a silly analogy, but it's part of it.
I agree with you. I said to my dad's funeral, if I was half as brave as my dad, I'd be an exceptionally brave person. And that's it. He really was. After he had a stroke, he was very still, shall we say, kept self-respect. Still, he didn't whimper at all or anything like that.
It's called character. It used to be called character. Yeah. That's what it was called. It's not about being clever or anything. I think it's a component of duty and ethics and moral behaviour, and they all come together.
Incredibly brave.
And it takes a long time to grow good human beings like that. That's why they're very valuable, I think. Anyway, let's move on to the next clip. This is not so long as the other one. Excuse me. This is still 3 minutes, and I think this one, I haven't labelled them, I just labelled 1, 2, 3 and 4. We might not get through all of them. It's from the same video a little bit later on. I think this refers to this book, or the author of this book, and certain discoveries there.
The half-century-long experiment of women's liberation and political enfranchisement has ended in disaster for the West. When you begin to start connecting the dots, you realize that since women have been given the vote, the entire center of politics and thus Western society has shifted ever more to the left. Women have also used their political enfranchisement to further the cause of the aptly named women's liberation. Liberation socially, liberation financially, liberation from family, from motherhood, liberation from religious dogma, and most importantly, sexual liberation. Once women were given equal say in the sphere of politics, it was only a matter of time until our civilization was swept up by the event horizon of its own collapse. All kinds of studies have been done on this subject, as this one from Columbia University, and they all, without exception, note that as women become more, quote-unquote, emancipated, the decline of the family is further accelerated. And as the family disintegrates and women move politically further and further to the left in their voting, many then begin to use the government as a surrogate husband and provider. Women are thus even more liberated from their traditional roles within the family and society at large. In one of the most comprehensive studies of civilizational decline, J.D. Unwin postulates in his book, Sex and Culture, written in 1934, that the main driver for the rise of a civilization is the degree of chastity of the said civilization's women. Unwin, a British social anthropologist at Oxford and Cambridge universities, studied 86 different cultures through 5,000 years of history and found a positive correlation between the cultural achievement of a people and the sexual restraint they observed. Unwin's impetus for the project was to test the Freudian theory that civilizational progress was the product of repressed sexuality. He found that discipline in sexual matters appropriated social energy to more civilizational ends. It's very complicated, but for Unwin, the fabric of society was primarily sexual, and heterosexual monogamy was the optimal arrangement for the planning, building, protecting, and nurturing of the family. If enough heterosexual partners made a monogamous commitment, civilizational energy was directed toward promoting the finest societal foundation possible. Without exception, each civilization he studied allowed its success to alter its moral code. According to Unwin, after a nation becomes increasingly liberal with regards to its sexual morality, it loses its cohesion, its impetus, and its purpose. From a chaste moral code, societies gained what he called expansive energy, and this energy allowed these cultures to expand into other weaker cultures. Now, when you compare the modern Western world with the Islamic one, you see exactly the results that Unwin's theory would predict. By allowing women to fuck freely, the West has de facto entered a matriarchy that disincentivizes young men. Islam, on the other hand, keeps their women chaste, and their expansive energy, as Unwin's theory predicts, is manifested in what we're observing today. The Islamic culture is the one who's expanding into the West, and it was only recently that the West was able to dominate all other cultures on the planet.
So, this is not a suggestion for you to become Muslim, but the point's well made, I think. Comments, anyone?
Another excellent clip. I have to watch that whole video for sure, so I'm going to look for it after this show. But excellent. It's almost like, yeah, he's explaining some movements, some directions that society takes. Because, yes, women will tend to be more leftist. And it can all stem from good intentions, but it's misdirected. It's like in my life, I had good intentions all along when I was running, for example, in the Green Party, which later it turns out I learned was the watermelon party, green on the outside, red on the inside, the worst, like it's a communist party. I just didn't recognize it. I was well intentioned when I was involved in the Green Party, but I was misdirected. So with the indoctrination that we've all been subjected to. But this guy, he's really laying it out. That was excellent. Another good clip there. Thank you, Paul.
No, it's great stuff. I've put the link, by the way, in the Rumble chat room, but if you don't find it, I'll send it to you after the show, Monica, and anybody else that wants it. I think it's really rather brilliant stuff. And the fact that this was known back in 1935, some of the research that these older researchers did is phenomenal stuff. But of course, they're all men, so they're to be dismissed, you see, because there's a lot of old world bias in it, according to modern commentators. But, well, it's just true. He's a fuddy-duddy. He's a fogey from England, and he went to Oxford. What would you expect from something like that? Well, that something accurate generally, and it generally was, at least certain independent researchers like him. The core thing there, not that this will be new to anybody, is that the fundamental foundation of a healthy civilization that has a sense of purpose and direction is sexual chastity and monogamous heterosexual relations. And everything that we're talking about with regards to the advertising and the mainstream media of the last 40 or 50 years is to destroy that. From the arrival of the pill, which of course has had an indirect effect on the physiology of both men and women because of the estrogen or whatever that keeps going into the water, producing a lot of pipe cleaner armed, very soft males if they don't watch it. This is why I think there's been such a big sort of surge, possibly, with all this sort of online fitness and guys building muscles upon muscles in the gym. I don't know if you're familiar with all this, but it's definitely a massive part of the sort of internet culture of men's health. Of course, they're kind of separated from women in this. It kind of goes too far for me the other way. It's slightly self-obsessive. There's a balancing point. There's a midpoint where it works. But I can understand. It's like a reaction against the softening of masculinity. I also think if you look at films, certainly modern ones, the males are excessively masculine. It's like ridiculous. They're like comic book versions. They're not believable either. And I've often wondered whether this is to make normal males feel even more inadequate because, I'm not like that bloke in the action movie who killed 15 people by, just standing still, or he's just got fists of all this kind of stuff. It's been so amplified and ridiculous. Whereas if you go back and look at, say, the male, if you think of someone like, say, Gary Cooper, particularly in, High Noon, that's such a fantastic depiction of, I think, of what men actually feel when they're faced with pressure. I know it's a cartoonized version of it. I know it's a filmized version of it, and therefore it has to have its dramatic impact. But yet again, he's just a normal guy faced with a very, very bad situation. He has to do something about it, and he's nervous, as most men are. It's not all sort of like running around and I'm impervious to bullets. That's not what happens at all. So it's much more relatable by normal people, whereas stuff today in the films is, well, it's just comic book nonsense. And I hope it's had its time. I keep on getting told that it has. And we might get back to films where somebody actually sat down and wrote a script that contained characters that you actually cared for. My problem is sort of like with modern films, which have got an element of all this nonsense in them. I want most of the good guys dead after 20 minutes because they're so incredibly smug, smarmy and self-confident. And it's just exhaustingly dull. It really is. But I mean, I've slightly gone off the track there, but I think it's all part of it. You see all these other things. And of course, we could say, I mean, it started before this, but it started with this release of the vote. It's been built upon. I mean, back then as well, when we go back to the 1920s in the States, Many people will be aware that Edward Bernays, Freud's nephew, was head of a lot of PR. He headed up a public relations firm. He kind of invented it. Public relations is basically social engineering conducted via mass media. And he was the guy that ended up getting women to smoke a lot more. You remember that in the 1920s? I was there because I'm quite old. Were you there, Eric, in New York in the 1920s? Monica was probably there too.
Of course I was. Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
we were there down there on Fifth Avenue. He got all those beautiful models, all dressed out with their bonnets and everything, looking all swish in the 1920s girl type things, all smoking cigarettes.
Freedom something. What did he call
Torches of Freedom.
That's it. Torches of Freedom. Thank you.
Is that what he called it? Right.
Yeah.
What's that you were saying, Patrick, about his relative? What was that you said the other day? About
Freud?
his relative?
Who's?
You mentioned
Freud.
something very interesting. No, Edward Bernays. You mentioned something about Netflix.
Oh.
If I can remind you.
Yeah, I think it's his grandson.
Heads up Netflix.
Netflix. It's one of his progeny that runs Netflix now. So
Interesting.
It's yeah. Well, he wrote a book called Propaganda. It's one of the only books I've read by him, but by Edward Bernays. And in the prologue, he mentions that he didn't really come up with a lot of the methods that he used. What he did is he looked to the Catholic Church because they had perfected propaganda, and they actually had an office of propaganda as one of the offices of the Vatican, and that they were using it as an effective means as a counter-Reformation type organization, where it was very sophisticated in the way that they would get the Christian, the Catholic idea spread of morality and other things, and he twisted it to conform with kind of like a corrupted capitalism type thing, a continuation of Sigmund Freud trying to pervert society into just becoming automaton robots, sex robots.
Yeah,
that we've got now. It's a long-going thing. I mean, all of this stuff goes back to Adam and Eve. I was listening to everybody speak. It's like you go to the original story of Adam and Eve, where the devil didn't go to Adam because he knew that it would be easier to deceive Eve first and then get her to manipulate Adam into eating the forbidden fruit and then getting cast out of paradise as a consequence, and all the punishments that came along with it afterwards, of going into labor and the man having to work by the sweat of his brow. And then their children grow up murdering each other. Cain murders Abel.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
so maybe giving women the vote has been the modern equivalent of that 2,000 years on. I'm teasing, of course.
I would say there's
an
something
echo
to
of
it. Because, well, it's kind of like in Christian tradition, the priesthood is men. It's not women as a rule, because of just the way that we're created. We're created different. We're created with unique. It's unique. Each one is unique and special, but at the same time we're different, and there's a reason for that, and that's procreation. Man, and when God made man, he made man, and then he made woman, and he made both of them, and they're both good. But then we've got this perverted notion nowadays where the whole sexual thing has gotten perverted to the point where it's like you don't even know if a man isn't a man or a woman is a woman when you look at somebody you meet in public. Even it's gotten to that point, but it's been a gradual process. And I think in America's history, it's been with us from the beginning of our country. It's not something that just suddenly happened when they gave women the right to vote. It was a gradual erosion.
Yeah, there was something that was happening before that became an idea that was worth investing energy in, or they thought was going to yield up some foul fruit or whatever. I think I might have mentioned before the other week, I think this was on Henry Mackow's site, an apocryphal tale of a conversation between Freud and Bernays when they were arriving in New York, I believe in the early 1920s. And Freud turned to his nephew, Bernays, and said, they don't know it yet, but we're bringing them the plague, i.e. the sexual revolution, which is what he wanted to plant in people's minds. And it is the plague, because it's created this dysfunction. It's amplified differences which naturally are there, and it's used them obviously for nefarious and civilization-shattering goals, which is what it's achieving.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how we're supposed
to
to turn it around, by the way. I don't know what the solution to all this, but I suppose at least understanding the problem more fully is a start. Otherwise, we won't be bothering discussing it, would we? Sorry, Patrick.
Well, Freud was there more or less to make it seem okay to get divorces. It justified it by saying that, oh, well, you can't help your sexual appetites and all these things. It's part of the psychology of man, and it also coincided with evolution, the idea of Charles Darwin and the evolution idea that, well, you can change, humanity's evolving, and that's kind of, we've got the extreme of that. I mean, a lot of these things like Malthusian ideology, where you have, the governments and these scientists can look at population charts and dictate that industry will grow better if we have a boom in the population here and a bust in the population there, and we're the deciders of man's future. It becomes kind of like that, and then what became eugenics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that some men aren't worthy of breeding. It's like it all became about good breeding and these sorts of notions that then made it justified to bring in the pill and the contraceptions and then abortions and make it so that we have it where it is now. It's like we've got women that don't want children. They want to have a career because it's somehow going to gain them something. So, I don't know, fame. A lot of women are, I mean, this has been a thing in the church too, that the theater has always been frowned upon, and that you didn't want your daughter aspiring to be a theater performer, because you more or less, it's like, being brought around by a pimp, more or less is what it becomes. So, but nowadays it's like everybody aspires to this. Oh, I'm going to be an actress or an actor or whatever it is, and
because there's a shortage of actors and actresses. We need a lot more, don't we, to appear in more mind-numbingly pointless, vacuous films. We really do. We just need tons of it. I mean, one of the things with all the TV channels and all these series is the sheer onslaught, these literally rivers of so-called entertainment. And I think people are obviously now sitting in this space. They always did to an unhealthy degree, but it's just gone mad. I mean, Eric mentioned earlier about the soaps over here, Coronation Street, training people how to whine about their lives all the time. EastEnders then moved that down to London, and now you whine about your life in London. Everybody's just whining in these things all the time. The idea of anybody saying something positive and uplifting and even imbued with some spiritual sensitivity of life would be simply written out by the writers. The idea is to create this permanent wall of kind of indifference to the finer things in life and to amplify all the puke. And that's exactly what it does, which is why I've never ever watched one. And if anyone ever comes on in a room, if I can't turn the TV off, I'm out of the room. I did have some relations, I don't know if I mentioned it before. This is about 10 years back. They were from Canada, I have to say, Monica. I'm terribly sorry about this. Although they were British in origin, but they'd spent an awful long time in Canada. They were addicted to watching Coronation Street. We went out for a walk and they just stayed at home. And when I came back into my house, they were watching it. So without even asking them, I just immediately turned it off. They were very upset.
That's
I said,
funny.
I'm sorry, I don't allow pornography to be played in my house. And that's that. Okay,
Good
and if you
for
don't
you.
like it, you can leave. I didn't say that, but I would have said it. I said, there's no way I'm having puke coming into my ears. Right? You can fill your ears full of puke if you want to, but I choose not to. Thank you very much, because it's just junk. It is. It's absolute junk. The whole thing, and it's terrible.
It is.
I've only seen 2 or 3 episodes my whole entire life, so I don't really know what it's about.
It's
Good.
depressing. Yeah, but it's depressing, and my sister was addicted to soaps, and I actually think it changed her mind. I really do. But
Of course it would.
when I say
It would.
it kind of brainwashed her.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think it was Patrick was mentioning about eugenics earlier. Did you know that the head of the Eugenics Society in this country in the 1930s was none other than Winston Churchill, and the deputy of the Eugenics Society was William Beveridge. William Beveridge was the chap who designed the National Health Service. Need I say more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
well,
of
it's
this,
like the
these
Maria
benign acts by government turn out, they look benign, don't they, on the surface? And who could possibly argue against people caring for one another? But that used to happen in families. If you were to use all these budgets to support families and the structures of families in towns and villages to do that, you would nail most of it. Like my wife has carers come in, and we've had community nurses come in. And the community nurses are fantastic. I'm serious. They're absolutely brilliant. They just reminded me of when I was looked after in hospital in the 60s, because I used to ride my bike into things a lot or get smashed up. I went in about half a dozen times from about the age of 6 to 12 or 14. I was just always getting stitched up and getting banged up. And they were great. And it's that same sort of energy. All of these things, of course, have been taken over for the centralised control of everything for our own good, including the centralised control of childbirth, apparently, which is all part of it. It's definitely led to that.
Well,
I just want to say... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. No, you're a guest.
Yeah, I just want to say that, because Paul, you were wondering, where do we go from here? Solutions to this. Probably the number one thing, and maybe it's too obvious to even state it, especially after this discussion, but to encourage, in however we can encourage it, to make it more desirable for young people to make families, have babies. I mean, that's sort of a no-brainer, but yet I guess we really have to think about how do we do that, in various ways to do that. Make it cool, make it desirable, make it something that young people, so men and women, that they aspire to, is to have families. I mean, really, that's what this is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's kind of what the church was about in the propaganda, because you had an institution, and which is what you need. You need institutional protection, is what we're talking about. And this idea of the right to vote and all this stuff, it deals with an institution. And if you don't have that, it's not going to work. But what you need is that protection of society, where you say, this is the law that God set down. This is God. This isn't just some man making up statutes. It's something God-given, where you have a monogamous relationship between one man and one woman, and the idea of that is to procreate. That's the whole goal of it, and to raise a family in a solid family structure where the children know who their father is, they know who their mother is, and they have reverence for them, and then all of the rest of it, the reverence for the state and the clergy, follow as a consequence of that.
Yes.
But we need propaganda on our side, and that it's gotten out of
and
control.
role models. You see, the thing is, role models have gone down the drain because people are uglifying themselves now. And have you noticed the amount of girls or young girls that will be attractive but have, I don't know, pink and green hair and tattoos, piercings all over the place? Now, piercings make me feel sick, actually. They really do. And I saw an attractive girl the other day, young girl, and she was covered in tattoos. Now, to me, I find that very unattractive. Why are they uglifying themselves? And
It's
seems
a
to
lack
be
of
going...
self-worth.
Well, you're spot on. And also we're becoming more tribal, because you notice that some unsophisticated tribes, there are sophisticated ones, their music is very basic. When they dance, they just jump up and down. And this is what we're getting to. It's becoming it's going back to a kind of primeval time.
Very primitive. Very primitive.
It's actions
isn't it?
without much forethought. It really is. I don't know if I'd mentioned, but I was out on Friday night. Someone said, I'm in town, let's go to the pub. So I went, okay. So we go down to this pub down here. And it's actually the hot part of the town. There are two pubs on either side of the road. They both put bands on, which is actually, I think, fantastic. It used to be like that in England a lot, and then they passed these laws and you can put bands in pubs. Well, these guys have got around it. Anyway, we were in one and there was a band on and it was a bit too noisy because I'm old and I just wanted to talk, and you can't do it. They weren't too loud. They were pretty good actually, but I just, we wanted to go and talk. We go to the pub over the other side of the road where the only guys in there, because it was about 10:30, and they were going to lock up at 11 o'clock or something like that. And there were two barmaids there. One was 19, because she told us, and the other one would probably mid-20s. They were great. They were fantastic. And the 19-year-old was very pretty girl, and really articulate and nice. But she had this bits of metal through her nose. And I was thinking, and you know what the sort of optics on something like this, there I am, a middle-aged gent. And I wanted to really say to her, just get rid of the junk out of your face. Or I would have tried to phrase it a little bit lighter than that, because she would have been so much more improved. But you see, I think they're doing this. There's other reasons. I think it's to distance men. We don't need you. There's all sorts of other stuff going on that they've imbibed. That's part of it. She wants to go off and start swimming with sharks. I said, what? She said, yeah, I don't really want to be a barmaid. I want to go and study sharks. I said, oh, that's pretty dangerous, isn't it? Said, no, I really like sharks. I said, well, where are you going to go and do that? She said, New Zealand. I said, do you have to get a sort of degree in oceanography or something? Or is there a degree in sharks? I don't know. So she has to go and study somewhere. And apparently New Zealand, if you really want to swim around with sharks and study them, that's where you go. I couldn't see the point in it myself. When I came home, I read this story of I thought this was kind of apocryphal in a way, a story of a woman in South Africa feeding sharks. One had leapt out and bit both her hands off. Both of them, right? And I thought, should I call her up and tell her to not hang around with... You can't, I do sound like an old fart saying these things, and hopefully she doesn't come to any harm. And I said, I hope you don't come to any harm, because I think you're going to a harmful place. It's their place, and I'd leave them alone if I were you. The ocean's for them, and, the high streets for us.
What good will it do?
It wouldn't.
That's the question I'd pose to her. Like, what good is it going to do to you?
I know, but they're not thinking. When you're 19, you're going to take on the world, right? You remember what it's like at 19? It's brilliant in a way. You're as a bloke, you're bulletproof at 19. You're not, but you think you are, and you're so full of that conviction. It's a wonderful time to be alive, sort of 19 into your early 20s, when you think you know everything, and you're about to get a very rude awakening that you know nothing. It's quite a little adventure. You go from a high to oh my God, I'm completely out of my depth. I don't really know what's going on, and that's part of the sobering up process. But it's and they were great. They were really pretty good. Not too many tattoos, but I just think all this purple hair stuff and all this stuff, it's just all part of it.
Though, Paul, if they had that same attitude of I'm going to go jump in with sharks as they do with marriage, I'm going to go jump into a marriage. Mm-hmm. We'd be a better place, wouldn't you say? Because which is more beneficial to the greater good? There's nothing wrong with looking toward the greater good. We kind of got a perverted version of this. I mean, look at the whole COVID scam. It was all for the greater good. Yeah. And these are the people that grow up thinking that I'm going to wear a mask for the greater good.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't do any good. But the priorities need to be shown to the children. Hey, don't you want to have a family? Don't you want to have children?
It does really it needs to be resold to them, because it's not being sold to them by their parents, because their parents are they're that next generation down from me. I'm old enough to be a granddad, and I thought, you're old enough to be a granddad. You can't tell her that. So it wouldn't work. I wasn't expecting, although we got on really well. It was really it was a wonderful thing. Anyway, we're coming to the end of our time slot here on WBN. You've been listening to Paul English Live, and to Monika Schaefer and Eric von Essex, and to Patrick Chanal, and to Paul Biener and myself, Paul English, for the last couple of hours. I hope you have anyway. We'll be back again at the same time on WBN, but if you want more of this, we're not going to stop now. We're going to carry on Rumble and elsewhere, and on Radio Soapbox and other places, so we're going to carry on for a little longer. I've got a couple more clips to play. I'm going to play us out with a tune by a wonderful female instrumentalist, Catherine Ashcroft. I may have played this about a year back, and it's just the second half of a tune. She plays the Uilleann pipes, which are absolutely indescribably beautiful, I think. Anyway, we'll play you out with this. We'll be back again same time next week. And as I said, we're going to carry on after the break over on Rumble and elsewhere. You want to tune in, go to paulenglishlive.com, and we'll see you on the other side. Oh, that gives me goosebumps, that one. That's Catherine Ashcroft. Absolutely amazing stuff. Absolutely love that. On the Ulian pipes, if I've pronounced them correctly. Wonderful stuff. Does it give anybody else goosebumps, or is it just me? What's going on? Maybe it's just me.
Yes. Just had to unmute there. Beautiful.
Yeah, it really is fantastic. She's still out gigging and doing things. She's a young lass. I think she's in her 30s or something, and she plays, and I'd love to go and see that. I'd love to go and see her play one day, and who knows, maybe it will happen. Actually,
I find
Monika,
it uplifting.
I do too. I do. I get all goosebumpy. I just find it. Oh, so there's that really quick passage in there. It's tremendous. Anyway, love stuff like that.
I know Alfred loves that too. Remember when you wanted us to pick music? He picked music that was along those lines.
Did he?
And stuff. Yeah.
Well, we'll have a chat. We'll get Alfred back at one point, but you're going to have to give him plenty of rum before he comes on, so that we can get him slowed down a bit. I'm only teasing. I'm only teasing. He would resent that bitterly, and rightly so. So, but that would be good. You mentioned, Monica, before the break, you mentioned something about, and Patrick was obviously coming in on that, about getting young people to have families again. And I think all the points we were raising then are absolutely true in terms of it's got to be almost like from a government agency. I hate to use such a thing, but it's got to come from an established power centres, as it were. But I am, of course, reminded of what they did in Germany in the 1930s when they were faced with effectively a shortfall in little babies. And it would be, so, you know, I know I always come back to this, but the number one thing at the top of the list that would sort this out is, first of all, we subdue and utterly extirpate, a great word, meaning to tear out by the roots so that it never grows back. We need to extirpate the current central banking system, because were we then in charge of the direction of expenditure, which we should be in our own nation, then we would be able to come up with and amplify and echo similar economic policies. And these were the same policies that were employed in Libya. You get married, you get a lot of money for nothing, to buy your house for nothing. Why? Because we want you to raise good children. If you look at houses and the way they go up, these things were built hundreds of years ago. They've been bought and sold loads, and all they do in the buying and selling is pump up the profits of the middleman. It's got nothing to do with actually creating soundness of civilization. It's ridiculous. But of course, everybody's used to it, just like, which is completely understandable in the sense that we've grown up with this, so you've got to work hard. But, you know, I've mentioned here before, they haven't sold them yet. There are 2 detached houses being built about 200 yards from where I'm sat, and they're on the market. These are 3-bedroom detached houses. When I say detached, they're detached by a matter of 4 feet. There's a 4-foot gap between the wall of one and the wall of another. That's how detached they are, not much. These are £670,000 each, these houses. I have no idea how anybody is supposed to buy them. You would need to be married, and you would both need to be earning, what, 40 or £50,000 a year? Even that wouldn't be enough. You're supposed to be able to borrow 3 times the amount of your combined salaries. So they'd have to be on £220,000, their combined salaries, to buy one. So who's going to buy it? They're not. Exactly. So they can't have a family. So there's nowhere to live. And it's these pressures that are coming down.
So, you know...
All right, Paul.
Oh, somebody else wants to talk there.
When it comes to helping make more babies, I know it's a dirty job, but I'm up to the task.
Yeah. It's not the making of
I'll
them.
be there before you.
Although it's not the making of them that's a problem. It's not. That's honestly, you're probably going to be in a long queue if one were formed under government control, of course. All right. And then you'd get people would be doing deals to get higher up the queue. It would just turn into another black market in baby production. It's not the making of them, is it?
Like
it's the raising of them and the maintenance of them.
And then, okay, so
like I
housing,
said, it's a dirty job, but I'll do it.
That's great.
Oh,
so the
thanks.
housing, you bring up the price of housing, which is, of course, that in Canada, too, it's unbelievable. I mean, I heard somebody say the other day that it used to be, in our parents' generation, it took maybe 3 to 3.5 years of the annual salary of just the single wage earner, the father of the household, to actually pay off a whole entire house, and that's a standalone house with a yard and everything. And now it's completely unattainable for most people. They, you know. But anyway, why the housing crisis? Nobody ever, well, in the mainstream media, nobody ever addresses the real crux of the matter, and that is all these new invaders into our countries, and they all got to be housed, and it driving up the prices of our homes for our people. So that would be the number one thing, is close the borders first, and then last in, first out, and continue from there. And then alongside with this encouragement for young people to have babies, just put an absolute stop to all this advertising, miscegenation advertising. That's just a big no-no. Of course, everybody here knows that, but just in general, you know, getting at the root of some of these problems that are at the, you know. Oh, and the other thing, stop the lies that fill the young people with fear. Every generation has something that fills them with fear, so that they fear for a future. And today's lies that fill the children with They even signed pledges, they're never going to have babies so they can save the planet from climate change, this whole carbon footprint lie. So there are young people who are avoiding having children just to save the planet because they want to do the right thing. And it's only our race of people that feel enough conscientiousness to do that. So based on these lies, they are conscientious enough to say, okay, we better not make the problem worse, So
yeah,
all
it's like
these
the
things.
birth control thing too. It's like it's the first world, you could say, people that get sucked into that, and then they then they regret it because it's like, well, why are we bringing all these other people in? Because the population's declined so much. It's like, well, you practiced contraception, you aborted all your generation of people that would have taken place there.
Yeah, but
And
I think that
not only
argument, Patrick, that the government puts out, that this is the reason we have to bring people in, is a complete load of rubbish. We don't need any of them. Never have. Not one. Ever. They're not needed now. Ever needed. To fulfill what? A need by industry. Forget it. Industries can go bust.
I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just saying that's how it is.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not. The same thing with the wars and weaponizing these other places where we have no business being. Mm-hmm. Those things create the instability that then drive that where they're coming over, and then that's their justification. Well, our countries have all been bombed out, and who wants to live in Syria? Who wants to live in these places? Afghanistan, any of these.
I think that word justification's key, because if you look at much of the narratives concocted by the social engineers, they are long burn. They take many decades, and then they've got the justification in everybody's heads for why you should follow this decision. Of course we need more people. Our industry will go bust. Nobody ever says, what industry? What are you talking about? Why do we even need any of this? There's a whole body of questions that are not even asked, that most people are not even aware that there's this body of questions that could be asked that shift the perception rapidly and could be acted upon, but probably can't be acted upon from a practical point of view because these ideas are not in sufficient number of people's heads. Not enough people know that this sort of conversation is going on. They do, way, way more than it used to be. But the idea that you can even question these sorts of things never even occurs to people. They're just bumbling along, really. I think that's the best description for it, as we all do for huge chunks of our life, slightly in a cloud until we get to some point of clarity with it. So we don't need any migrants here, never have, ever. They've never, ever been required. It's just a complete lie. And I had someone say to me the other day, a woman, and this is to do with this leftist stuff. All the time, they always go liberal. And they said, well, we invaded all those countries, so, we've got to take them in. Okay, so you want to die then? Is that what you're saying? You just want to see your people wiped out because that's what's going to happen, because we will forego things for the future.
And that's just it,
and they
too.
don't have to.
How is it we that caused these wars to occur?
I
isn't. You and I
know it isn't. Do it. I know, but it's in her head. It's in many people's heads. This is a line that we're going to hear again and again and again. You just hear it and see it everywhere.
It is. I mean, I'll give you an example. We're talking about women having the right to vote, and here in America, that came about as a constitutional amendment, which, if you look at the constitutional amendments, they all line up in certain eras in our history, like right at the beginning, right after the Revolution in America. Yep. And then the Civil War. The Civil War brought about 3 amendments. And then after that, it was I think it was like 1908, they had the 16th Amendment. What was the 16th Amendment? Income taxes. So a man working, supporting his family, then had to support other families by paying income tax to the government to then distribute it, right? The communist distribution of wealth and all of that occurs. And shortly after that, it was like, well, then we got to have a popular vote for the Senate. We got prohibition. No more alcohol. You foolish men going out and getting drunk. And then after that, it was like, vote for women. I think it was the 19th Amendment, 18th or 19th, where that came about. And it seems like those things, go hand in hand. Taking away the man's ability to support himself. The same with the Civil War. it was all about slavery, right? And that kind of goes hand in hand with the feminism thing too, because women shouldn't be subservient to their husbands. What good is that going to do?
Of course they should.
Right. Well, no. I mean, slavery is wrong, Paul. Come on, you can't enslave someone else. So you can't.
I know it's wrong. I keep on wanting to run an ad, though. I'd like a slave in the house.
Are perverted because there's always going to be a master-slave relationship. We have it today with the wage slave. Like I can't. I'm not the boss at work. I got to do what the boss tells me. I'm not independent in that regard. And everybody's that way to one extent or another. It's just that's where Freud and all these Edward Bernays public relations all become important, because it's all based on public perception of these things. The definitions get skewed so that then they can be manipulated by the powerful oligarchic type people that really have the power. And then the truth becomes the opinion of the powerful. It's not the truth. Truth is no defense. Just like in the whole Holocaust denial type thing. It's like truth is no defense because the oligarchs say so. It all comes down to money controlling things and corruption.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And like I'm totally with you. Get a state bank.
I know you are. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I was just sort of trying to prise open that there's sort of 2 or 3 narratives going on. There's the one that the mass public consume, and that is therefore the power, even though it's complete manure and won't solve anything. But most people go along with it because they see that most other people are going along with it. That's changing. It is changing. It's definitely changing. So
we're fooled into feeling that guilt, like, oh, I'm responsible for slavery, or I'm responsible for women not having the right to be free. It's all shame, and that's how people are controlled. It's easy to control a dog, let's say, for instance, by shaming him. Oh, you shouldn't have done that, you dirty dog, and they cower away, and it's a manipulation trick of gaining power. And somehow we need to do that in a just way to shame people for the real shameful things that occur, the murdering, the torture, and all of these things that go along with a war.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at this thing in Ukraine. Oh, we're going to get minerals out of the deal. It's like, is that what it's all about? It's all about
a deal.
We just
doing
went
a deal.
All of this bloodshed. Yep. Yeah, just to do a deal, just so some group of people could get revenge on another group of people for some perceived wrong that happened 100 years ago.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I keep thinking, in terms of of trying to solve what we're addressing here, the revitalization of our people. There are so many aspects to it. I put the money power at the top because they're all getting paid. The guys in the media, they get paid at the end of the month. They wouldn't get paid if I was in charge, which means they'd kill me, right? They would, That's what, or whoever started to do that. If you start to push in that direction of really making society an equitable proposition so that people really do have a stake in the outcome of their own lives in real tangible terms, not in terms of having the vote and all this other stuff, then you've got a major enemy. And it's a major enemy purely because of the amount of power it's been able to accrue to itself over the recent centuries. I mean, it's always existed in one form or another, but its power now is considerable, obviously. Our great hope, I guess, or the area that we're ploughing, we're a part of it here in this conversation, is to get these communications increased in frequency and intensity and clarity so that they transmit to more and more people and they go, yeah, this is fundamentally not right. I mean, whenever I read about what they did in Germany in the 30s and giving people interest-free loans to buy their houses, it's an extremely exciting proposition, isn't it? I think it is. Because you'd, in my mind, I'm seeing, not overnight, but over a period of 5 to 10 years, it might be even quicker than that, the revitalizing of little towns and villages and the sound of English children running up and down the street. I know this is poetic and people would laugh at that kind of thing, but that's really what it's all about in our case. It's actually about this joy of family life.
Did Churchill say that it didn't matter to him whether Germany was run by Adolf Hitler or by a Jesuit priest, but they had to get rid of the German
That's right.
competition.
He did. It was the strength of the German people as a whole. It wasn't National Socialism or Adolf Hitler. He didn't care who ran it, as long as they were subdued and could no longer provide stiff competition to the money spivs in the City of London, who he worked for. It's as simple as that. It's always that. It's never been anything else. And I think, the mentality of the people on the other side, not that people like you and I are necessarily going to fully understand it, thankfully. I don't want to. But from what I've seen is that they are behaviorally conditioned to retain power at any cost, literally any cost. And they will literally drive the nation into the ground. Sun Tzu said something like this, the Japanese or the Chinese war guy, The Art of War. He said, an evil ruler will literally run his country into the ground to retain power and will be quite happy to rule over the ashes. And that's who we're governed by, because they can't behave any other way. Not now, most of them. I think there are good signs on the horizon, but also we have to, keep your enemies close. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer still really is a byword, They're definitely playing good cop, bad cop, I think, out there in the communication space. It's definitely going on all the time.
Powder dry.
Yeah, keep your powder dry. Fancy another clip?
That's a very good idea. Yes, another clip. And then just before you do that clip, I have to just tell you, while I have the chance to do so, that I have been... I was thinking about this a lot before, obviously, because I agreed to come onto this show, but, I'm convinced about this basic premise of this, the women losing the vote.
Yeah.
So there you go. I'm just telling you.
Well, I think there are. I know you are, and my mum was, and most of the women that I've respected have always been like. When that women's lib thing was kicking off, my mum used to just sort of scoff at it and go, "What are they on about?" She just thought it was absolutely ridiculous. And I remember her saying, I was kind of embarrassed when she said, there's just too much obsession with sex these days. And she's right. And Eric mentioned earlier on the permissive society. And we've mentioned this warrior woman over here who was mocked mercilessly at the time called Mary Whitehouse. And she started off as a one-woman campaign. It grew massively against the permissive society, and she was therefore ridiculed. She had these sort of librarian horn-rimmed glasses. She looked like a sort of slightly overweight, middle-aged, middle-class English person who was completely out of touch with everything, you see, because you can tell she's wearing those funny glasses. But she wasn't. She was spot on. So it's almost as if what we really want is not a women's movement to give up the vote, because it's not worth anything, but a women's movement to support men, and it needs to be phrased better than that. It is, let's get together with the men and rebuild it. And that's the thing. Yes. What this has done is it has separated us, or separated a lot of us. And also those young people that get together and have still got that running through them are isolated from their peer group, because most of their peer group are donkey brains who haven't worked it out yet. And we've got some very bright young people, but they get hived off into the system and end up working against the rest of their generation all the time. And when Eric was saying, you look at the people that are governing us now, they are people with adolescent arrested development. It's been going on for years. They've just got no substance. They think their ideas are genuinely creative and good, and they're not even laughable. They shouldn't even be written down. They're that plain stupid and counterproductive, but there's no way that you and I could convince these people that what they think, like Keir Starmer, who is just the new ultimate low tide watermark in human evolution in terms of political leadership, he can't listen to us. He's literally incapable of it. It's not going to happen. It would just handle your communication like you don't know anything because, I studied Marxism or something goofy like that. Anyway, let's have a 30-second clip from Black Pigeon again. I can't remember what's in this one. This one's just a mere 30 seconds, so maybe it's cracking. I don't know.
Terrifyingly, Unwin also noted that there was no case in any of the studies he'd made in which a culture managed to restrict the sexual freedom of women once they'd been loosened. A feminist society and future is an oxymoron, as it's unsustainable in the long run. Based just on past history, a civilization that embraces feminist values will cease to exist in a very short time. This is why we've never seen a feminist civilization aside from very short spans at the end of great empires.
Isn't that what we're living through right now? At the end of a very great span of empires, a feminist civilization.
That's so interesting. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
But who actually built the cities and towns?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Fred Dibner. He was a chap that used to demolish chimneys. He was a steeplejack. You probably never heard of him in America or Canada. And he said it was men in boiler suits who built civilization and built these towns, and it was men in business suits that destroyed them.
Yeah, he used to collect steam engines.
That's
that guy.
He did.
I remember
he was one of those
Russia,
guys with a heart of pig iron and absolutely fearless. Have you ever seen any of his videos of him just going up the side of a chimney? It's just off the charts. No safety equipment.
Like
Nothing.
I was saying, I was in Russia and I saw chimneys like that, where it's just like an entire industrial zone, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
I was just in awe of this, of what was built.
And did you notice there was very few housing estates in Russia? They seem to be detached houses with sort of big fences around them.
Yeah, that's true. They have fences. That's one thing that's different from say in America here, is everybody's got a gate and a fence, because they're used to invasion, whether it's by wild animals or warring factions of people. Whereas here, they're just astonished when you see little children out trick-or-treating for Halloween going door to door. It's like, you can't do that over there.
Yeah, and something else is that they have plenty of space. The houses are large, they're huge. Whereas in Britain, you have to pay a
that's another
fortune
thing.
for a
They're
little
well
tiny
built.
place.
They're built out of strong material, thick walls. And then when they see the devastation from a tornado here, they're like, what are your buildings made of? It's just like, your walls are so thin. The plasterboard you put up is, thin compared to what it should be. But
you have, I know that in New England, my relative had shingles on her roof. Now, shingles in this country is something that you suffer from,
right?
Which you go to the doctor for, but you got a disease on your roof, No, it's actual shingles. But the roofs, I mean, I was quite surprised because they sell shingles in this country for shed roofs, but not for housing. You don't have, you got to have sort of proper tiles on your roof, and that type of thing. But I think probably timber may be cheaper where you are in the States than here, because our timber mostly has to be imported, whereas you've got it readily coming through from Canada and vast areas of California, or California, it's just called now,
Yeah.
But
that point he just made in the clip, the sobering point in that brief clip, that Unwin discovered that once a civilization had gone down this emancipation of women route, that not one of them ever reversed the tragic decline, not one. And
what happens to them?
Well, it just builds up, I guess, as a behavioural pattern, and everything goes out of whack. I mean, what happens to them is what's happening to us. Like, you get women in politics, which they shouldn't be allowed in. Serious.
It's the same. And minorities. They end up being privileged.
Yeah,
because there's a compensation there that takes place. So, it's only fair that we have to compensate them, so we pay them equal with men, so they can be, equality becomes the thing. But the problem is they're never going to be equal, so it's a deception. It's a plot.
I mean, equality, the pursuit of it is a behavioural habit of someone who's not well. It's unachievable. It's a completely vacuous, idiotic, commie goal and deception for the mind.
Right.
We don't even want it.
We have men pretending to be women because they get more benefit by being a woman than they do by being a man, and especially if they're a tranny man, it becomes
it's disrespectful.
Them.
Yeah, but it's disrespectful for women, isn't it?
Of course.
It's complete
that's why you have
That's a very
lesbians
good point you
about.
make there. I remember my friend making that point. There's all these tranny shows or whatever, drag queen shows, that's what they're called, men dressing up, but they do a caricature of women, making themselves actually quite ugly. Like, it's not even portraying a beautiful image of a woman, it's portraying a very caricature
disgusting.
Disgusting. You're absolutely right. Like, they exaggerate everything to the point of total ugliness. They're not trying to make themselves beautiful. It's a disgusting display of perversion.
It's reveling in filthiness.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I've often thought a bloke with 5 o'clock shadow is a bit challenged to make himself look beautiful as a woman, which of course is why you shouldn't dress up as a lady. It's ridiculous, isn't it? The other thing with
I don't
women
like drag acts.
No, I never have. I can't stand anything that goes in that direction at all, or people that are trying to get a laugh out of it, or anything. I never liked the Python sketches where they're all dressed up as women. Actually, they were slightly different. Well, there was one where they were housewives, and it's the one that's got the word nigger baiter in it. Do you remember that one? Shouldn't say that on area. Where it's a hilarious sketch where her best friend just explodes on the settee. That was really rather funny. But overall, I never really liked it. It's as if they were enjoying it a bit too much. Stop that. It's ridiculous. I don't need you to do that.
That's the thing with the
Cut
theater.
Yeah.
Well,
that thing about women in politics as well, and about what you were saying, Patrick, I've often thought that the natural mothering instinct to care for the young is warped in politics, and they extend that to everyone. Apparently, according to the women, we can just look after everybody forever. We, the men, that is, we're the ones who are going to do most of the work and have their pockets plundered and then become emasculated because of it, because they won't be able to hold themselves together to become strong to attract women. It literally destroys everything. It's just a massive domino effect, which really kind of supports Freud's thing that we brought them the plague. It is. It's a transmissible disease, and it infects men and women. We all get infected by it.
The other thing with this country, I think, that the rot sort of started, is that during World War II, Russia conscripted women into the armed forces, and there was women fighter pilots. There was one woman fighter pilot went up when she was pregnant, and built them tough over there. And Britain was, as far as I know, Germany was quite horrified by it. Was one of very few countries that wasn't communist, that conscripted women. People don't realise that the Conscription Act, or the draft, as you call it in America, came in 1939, and my dad was 20 years of age, just the right age at the wrong time to be conscripted. And then I believe it was either 1940 or 41, I'm doing this from memory, that it was brought in for women. And it was, and that's why lots of women had fake marriages to elderly men to get them out of going in the forces. And they say, these modern historians say, oh yes, the divorce rate went through the roof in 1945 because the troops coming back were very altered men. No, the divorce rate went through the roof because the women that had married men to get out of going in the forces divorced them afterwards, and that was all part of the deal. So I can't say this is 100% true, but I think that my auntie may have done to get out of going in the forces. And but the women didn't go into combat. They were doing a supporting role, mostly repairing vehicles, pay corps, and that type of thing. But even so, there was a big push in World War II to get women involved in it, whether it was just for support or, as nurses and morale boosting or supply. Yeah, it was compulsory. But in this country, it's compulsory, and it's also compulsory. You were not allowed to leave your job. And my mother was working in a factory, and she hated it. But she couldn't leave it because it was against the law.
Rosie the Riveter, the whole Edward Bernays thing. We're back to him again. Propaganda to get women into the workforce. Like we need the war effort. We're going to win the war. We need women to participate.
But in America, it wasn't compulsory. In this country, it's compulsory. You had to go into.
Well, it would be hard to enforce it here because there's such an expanse of land where it really would be tough to. That's why we don't have another civil war going on and we haven't since, because it's such an expanse. You don't have to live in a urban area if you don't want to. You can go out in the country, and I think that's a good thing, and it's protected us, is having the rustic as well as the urban. because you have the ability, if you don't want to be around a bunch of people, to just go out and live in a rural city.
That's brilliant. But no, what happened? The conscription was women. It was 18 to 30, and the only women that were exempt were if they were married or had a child to look after, and that was it. So they had to go in the army, and they did all the marching. They learned how to use guns and everything like that, like the men.
Well,
and that is communism.
In Vietnam, they had a similar thing, because that's kind of when it petered off. Having a conscription of any sort here was the Vietnam War.
That's right.
And the men that were married were exempt from it. So there were a lot of men getting married, and eventually they took that exemption. Yeah, and I think in the 64, 65. And if you were enrolled in a school, you were exempt, because you were becoming, intellect, you're in higher education, and if you weren't, you were more likely to be drafted as a consequence. And
Trump, actually, he was medically discharged. He got a medical exemption because he had problems with his heels. But unfortunately,
and he probably bribed the doctor, or his mom did.
Yeah, and he played badminton. Isn't that strange? Amazing.
Yeah, that was weird.
And also Bush Jr. got into the National Guard, and it's mainly the rich people's kids that go into the National Guard, because I think there's only one unit ever went to Vietnam. They stayed in America. Strange, that, isn't it? And Clinton, he studied law, and he came to Britain. That's how he got out of it as well.
He was a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite amazing, isn't it? And when you look at him, he's as thick as two short planks, isn't he? Really? He's not exactly the sharpest knife in a box.
Yeah, well, he also was a victim of, and I wouldn't say a victim, but I mean, in a way he was, of the whole sexual revolution thing. Because, look what happened with the Monica Lewinsky thing and the Epstein type stuff that goes on to this day, where you have politicians who get involved at, they can't control their lusts, so they get involved with these blackmailing operations, and they become it's like they're promoted after that, because they know they can trust them, because they're blackmailable. And then when it comes time to go to war, those people are easily manipulated. And that's, Freud was part of that whole thing. That's the whole Illuminati type thing, where it's like, instead of confessing to your sins to a Catholic priest, you're confessing it to a psychologist, who then can use what the knowledge he's gained from that to manipulate you and to hold a leverage over you so that you pay him more money, or however it is. And it's more sophisticated in the military, I'm sure, where they manipulate people into these things.
Yes.
Oh yeah, spot on.
Isn't it that old little saying, anybody that wants to go see a psychiatrist needs his head examining? That's what I think that's a good one. We've got another clip here, 1.5 minutes. It's the last one I managed to clip out of the 8-2. There's probably other good stuff in there as well, but let's listen to this one through. Last little clip for the show.
The signs of decline are already observable. While many countries are sliding into social decline, the canary in the coal mine is the self-described humanitarian superpower that pursues a feminist foreign policy. When looking at Sweden, it's one of the most gender-equal countries on Earth. And while they've become the rape capital of Europe, they're flushing their culture and country down the toilet and pressing forward in their civilizational suicide at an ever-accelerating pace. The total and complete feminization of Sweden and its men have allowed their women to invite their country's own destruction through the importation of millions of unassimilatable and aggressive people from completely alien cultures. Not only are they borrowing money to fund the colonization of their country, but they are now even creating gender imbalances that will have severe and lasting repercussions on their society's future. And they await their doom with smiles of tolerance and passivity, calm as Hindu cows. Looking again at Unwin's work, he leaves us with a stark dilemma. It may not be possible to save the West. According to his model, this process is irreversible, and the only way to do so would be to restrict the sexual freedom of Western women and move back to a more patriarchal society. And as things stand, this is probably an impossibility.
Why? Why is it an impossibility? It probably is. It's one of the reasons, though, why I bang on about becoming a neo-Victorian, because I just associate it within recent history as being a period of strong males building things and doing stuff, the sorts of things that we want to get back to in a way. My sort of tenuous little hope with all of this is that the previous civilizations that went down the toilet because of it, and it may be too strong a force to cope with, sort of like a disturbed wave. You just can't stop it, like a tidal wave or something. But my little hope is that because of the communications capacity that we now have, which we've never had before, if we can continue to improve our organization and reach and make things more concise, more impactful, and draw people over to this understanding, then there is an opportunity to create a counter movement, as it were, which is about the restoration of these traditional values, which I suspect everybody wants. It's just that they've become so distant from them because they don't see them in front of their eyes. A good friend of mine returned back, Helen, if you hear this, another Helen. I know quite a few Helens, actually. 3, I think it is. Helen had returned to England, probably at Heathrow or Gatwick or some place like that, and took a photograph of photographs that were up there in the airport. Pictures of English people. There was not one English man in it. And the English woman that they put in there was overweight, covered in tattoos, and sat in a deck chair looking like a beach ball gone wrong. That's what's being broadcast back at us. So certainly one of the roles that this communication space has, and I'm talking not just about us, but everybody that's involved in this conscious understanding of where things are going, is to reinforce the positive and not just dwell all the time on analysing the negative. We have to do that, and I want to do it, and we must keep on doing it. But hopefully it'll lead us to more constructive sort of behaviour patterns where we can bring it back, like organising country dances. I'm serious. I think that these connective communal spaces need to be done, and this is a matter for all of us of getting off our arses and organising things on a local level, and to be inspired by others that can do that. Of course, a big drawback to that is that the really great organisers on that, the social organisers, are the women. They're brilliant at it. And we need them back to do that again. I'm quite happy. I mean, whenever we had parties and stuff, my mum and all her sisters organised the whole thing. And the men said, "What do you want me to do?" And we're happy to do whatever they were asked to do, as I would be as well under those circumstances. Absolutely the right. You're in charge now. This is the thing about women's power. And Monika was mentioning earlier about home building. They've got all the power, and the men want them to have it in the home. I absolutely want it. My dad did. Things were run in a particular way, and I don't think there was anything untypical or weird about that. It's just completely natural. The woman's kingdom is in the home. She's raising the children.
Exactly.
You know, and it's phenomenal. Too. We can't do it. We can't do that. When we don't have that skill set, we don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want men going around pretending to be women, because you've got this really disgusting situation where sodomites are getting together and getting little boys, and then half of them get raped. This is not excessive, what I'm saying. This is true. You will have seen reports about this stuff.
Grooming games.
It's sick.
It's like it's grooming. And the thing of it is, these government schools are nothing more than orphanages, if you think about it, of willingly giving up your child to go to a public school so that you can go to work and be a wage slave to some boss who doesn't really care about you or your children, because they can't. It's not their responsibility. It's you. You're responsible for your family, for your children, for raising them in the way that they grow up and be moral people who have a purpose. And these government schools make them seem like you don't have a purpose. You're just an orphan. Your parents don't care for you. They don't love you or respect you enough to want to be with you, especially in your formative years, where it's so important that you have someone who cares about you looking after you and not neglecting you, because you'll be put in dangerous positions as a consequence.
Yeah, when they now in schools, I mean, this is another solution we can talk about, is to encourage young parents or parents of young children do not send your children to the public school system, because now it's gotten to the point where the teachers will say to the children, "Oh, we'll keep your secret. You can tell us, and don't worry, we won't tell your parents." In other words, even by whatever that's for, whether it's for this extreme thing of, let's cut off, let's mutilate your body or turn you into the other sex or whatever.
Gangs.
But
it's grooming gangs in the
but
schools.
then it also, even if it was about something very trivial, even if it was about something else that was very trivial, with that message of we'll keep your secret, whatever it is, whether you want to just, comb your hair or part your hair the other way or something, doesn't matter. It's giving the children the message that, the parents are kind of like their adversary, and the teachers are going to be their friend. They're going to keep a secret against the parents. It's kind of like, the parents are the enemy. Like, what a message to give the parent, to give the child. It's very communistic, isn't it? So I was just going to say that feminism is ultimately a war on men. I mean, that's what it is. It's a war on men. And this has been such a wonderful discussion. I've learned a lot and whatnot, but I always still come back to this, that we have to keep our eye on the ball, and that being who has pushed feminism on us. Now, these creatures, they brag about it, but when we name them, they do call us anti-Semitic. Funny that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to keep our eye on that and make sure that the awareness, because we need to guard against, even in this discussion, that, women in politics, that has been a disaster. We always have to remember who has pushed this on us. And it's not because women are the enemy of humanity. It's because we have different qualities that do not make us suitable for getting into a life of politics. And I fully agree with that. And we tend to be more leftist and all this stuff. I can attest to that just from my own participation in politics during my life when I was not yet awake to what is going on, right? So I fully agree with that, but always keeping our eye on the ball, that we don't accidentally get into a situation where it's thinking, it's because women are bad somehow that they have done this. No, it's like, no, we have different qualities and are definitely more suited to be in the role of running the home, which, like you said just now, Paul, you wouldn't, some of those things, you wouldn't want to do that, right? And it's just like, I wouldn't want to do some of the things that men are really good at. And those are my natural instincts. When I was young, like, I didn't want to do some of those things that men naturally do better. And yet women, we are good at some other things that maybe you don't want to do, that the men don't want to do. So this is all very, very good. I've just enjoyed this discussion so much. But I guess I know we're running up against the end of it, I think. So I just wanted to make that point. We always have to be very, very clear that it is this eternal enemy of mankind that has pushed us in this direction, this feminist agenda onto us. So there you go.
I think that's true. Maybe to try and put a positive spin on it, is that it's required for us to be taken apart in this way so that we can get conscious about what it is that really works. Much of it, I suppose, in the past was simply taken for granted, as it ought to be in a stable, civilized space, which it used to be, or at least our perception of it is that, although I'm not so naive as to think that certainly this nation wasn't at war all the time, because it was. Ever since we got the Bank of England, this country's been at war every year since, apart from 3 years since 1694. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's not that Englishmen and Scotsmen want to go off and start fighting wars everywhere, but somebody does and has made use of us to do it. Of course, that duty has transferred over to America recently, in recent times, after World War II.
5 years for the past.
Yeah, you've been made the manpower and muscle power to carry out the threat of the economic masters. So, but there is a positive. Actually, Aunt Sally makes some pretty good points about black pigeon. which I tend to agree with. She says, and hi, Aunt Sally. She says, I believe he is a doom monger. Yes, I think there's definitely an element of serious doom in all of this. And a hyper race mixer. I don't know about that, but you might be right. If he is, then he's clueless on that thing. But I guess I view it like clocks. Even if they're broken, they're right twice a day. And when you come across a good thing, I'll even take good stuff from the other side when I hear it, if I think it chimes in with what we need to hear. So I don't really sort of think that any one person is going to be right or on point all the time. I've not got any experience of that apart from God, in terms of getting back to God's laws, which is, of course, another aspect of the condition that we're living under is that we've been parted from them slowly but surely, inexorably, over a long period of time. We've been shifted away from these things. And it was a bit like that document I was mentioning last week on the common law, that since 1215 they spent 800 years shifting this nation away from trial by jury, the real trial by jury, where the jury can actually decide on the law itself and is therefore the highest law power in the land when it's sitting and doing things. All the ways of operating cleanly and honourably have been practised round here at some point, and we've been parted from them. And of course, Monica, you're absolutely right. An enemy hath done this, hath sown the tares amongst the wheat. Absolutely hath. And that's kind of what we're dealing with all the time with all of these things. But I think this topic, even though we've covered a lot, it kind of opens it up that there's so much more to cover with it. There's so many more aspects. The idea of a British family movement is very appealing to me, but it's got to be robust. It's not some sort of mincing thing when it's all lovey-dovey all the time. It's to understand exactly what the strength of them are, because without them, we're not a people. No people can be, it seems to me, without resilient families. And they've done everything they can, courtesy, it's in the Communist Manifesto, is it not, to destroy the family. And the creation of the teenager was after the creation of the emancipation of women, and these have been massive blows to fracturing natural, cohesive, good quality family relations, it seems to me. So I'm not pointing the finger at women. It's the process. You look at it. The enemy has picked the weakest point. It went for the women. It got them smoking, did all these things, filled their head full of silly ideas. I'm doing that on purpose, right? About power and all this kind of stuff. And we can be in charge without realizing that they don't want to be in charge, that they are reduced in power, that they haven't been empowered, they've been disempowered, and that they've been distanced from that naturally supreme feminine power that men want in the world. We need it. We need it to become men. We need to be around feminine, beautiful women. Even if we can't get one, we love it that they exist in the world. We really do. We love it.
That's what men have gone to war for, is to protect their women and children, right? Yep. That's what men have fought through the ages, to protect. Yes. Exactly that.
It is. So all the treasures here.
Look at the high divorce rate. But not only the high divorce rate, the huge amount of single people now that can't find someone. And I was talking to a neighbour, and she said where her child goes to school, her child and another one are the only two children whose parents are together. All the rest of the class, their children are divorced.
What a change. What a change from when I was in school, because it would have been the opposite ratio. Maybe there were a couple of children in a class of 30 who came from divorced parents. Maybe if that. But
same for me.
Opposite ratio.
There was a hidden social pressure that you didn't do that, and for good reasons. And of course people go, oh, well, I just couldn't live with him anymore, I couldn't live with her. Well, you chose it. Tough. I would make it virtually impossible to get divorced. I don't care. It'd have to be exceptional circumstances.
Well, Jesus talked about this, and he basically said that divorce was set up by the followers of Moses. Moses allowed it because of the stubbornness of the people. Mm-hmm. And you get stubborn people, and this is what you get. And we've got a nation of that.
If you get divorced, you lose the vote, right? You should lose things. And it's like I felt the only people that should have the vote are men in a marriage with children. Until you've got a child, you don't get the vote, ever. Why should it be governed by single men? They haven't fulfilled their role. The role of men is to become fathers, and the role of women is to become mothers. And when you do that, then you get the vote. You're responsible. You're doing that. If you get divorced, you lose everything. It's up to you. You don't get a say in the management of the nation when you can't even manage your own family.
Well, I would say if they're single, they would have, or without children, I would say they'd have to take some sort of vow of seriousness.
You trust that, do you?
Not be
I wouldn't trust it.
Well, I wouldn't want a scoundrel, someone who goes around, sleeping with whoever. Yeah, I wouldn't want them, of course. I'm not talking about them, though. I'm talking about somebody who can control their passions.
Yeah, but how would you ever know that? They all say they do right now, don't they? They don't. I think you just need something blunt and simple. It's like the light switch is either on or off. We need simple, plain things, in my view, that children and everybody understands. If you do this, you lose that. Got it? That's how it works. Why?
What about taxing sex? It could be PAYF, pay as you fornicate. Sorry. I'm not really joking. Some people thought...
What a wizard wheeze.
Yes, these tax inspectors looking through binoculars.
Well, they become sex inspectors, wouldn't they? They become sex inspectors.
Oh, look, here it goes.
But I've mentioned before this thing about... I mentioned this thing, back in 1381, the Peasants' Revolt kicked off because they were going around checking young men and women, for like teenage boys and girls, for pubic hair. And if they found some, they paid this tax. And the mothers in fobbing, particularly where it kicked off, which is why we have this word called fobbing off people, putting them off, they resented this bitterly. So these pubic hair inspectors, they got killed, some of them. They just got killed. You don't do that. That would come back when everybody's clear about why we have these laws and why they strengthen us as a people. And you let them go, and we just get weak immediately. We're just getting weakened all the time. So
I am learning so much on this show today. This is just amazing. I've never heard of such a thing.
Oh, you stick around with us, Monica. It's like this every week. It's not. This has been a really juicy one, actually, this week, and I'm really glad we set it up this way. I mean, there are other really, really concrete... I love this topic because I think it's right at the heart of our problem, and it also shows a way through if we can get back together again. It's not that I feel separate from women. I don't. But the idea of rebuilding how it used to be is an extremely enticing prospect. How we do that, of course, is a massive challenge. But
by practicing those virtues that we want to instill in others.
Mm-hmm. And what about that idea that in Germany during World War II, where grandmothers voluntarily, they didn't have to have qualifications, but they must have had a family, actually went to a government-run university to teach young women how to become mothers, about how to run a home budgeting, how to cook, because the elderly women had all that experience. And afterwards, the young girls would actually get a certificate to show that they've been through this course, so that when they were dating a fella, she'd show the certificate, and the bloke would think, yes, I'm going to be looked after well, aren't I? Because she knows how to sew, she knows how to cook, she knows how to run a home.
There is something to that, though, Eric. Yeah, the women don't seem to be into that sort of thing, like learning how to sew, staying home and being at the loom.
We got a minute here, guys. A minute to talk. Okay. So just to wrap up. It
just seems like those things are then passed off into the culture where it becomes about fashion, and we get all these people who, we're back to the whole celebrity thing. What's the celebrity wearing? That kind of thing.
We have to make it desirable again, this lifestyle of being a homemaker. We have to really find ways to make that desirable, and that young women would aspire to do that.
Well, Monica, I'd love to have you back on the show, and we can discuss this further in a few weeks' time, because I think it's an ongoing theme. I think it's a cracking theme. I want to thank you all for being here this evening. We'll be back again same time next week. Eric's on at the weekend, I believe.
Yes, this Sunday.
This Sunday at 8 o'clock. Check out Radio SOAPBOX for that, and your Rumble channel.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
We'll be back again same time next week, and so keep good until then. Bye for now.
When it's cold and damp in New York City, and all the girls don't look so pretty, and you can't find a job, and you're looking like a slob, go west and realize your dreams. Go west, eat pork and beans. Go west, wagons home. Go west, it's all the rage. Go west. So climb on board, don't miss this chance. Cowboys do a buckwing dance. It's entertaining, it's never raining. You don't need no more explaining. Go west, realize your dreams. Go west, eat pork and beans. Go west, wagons home. Yeah! Go west, it's all the rage. Go west, to get a living wage. Go west, wagons home. Now way out west, you can build a little nest, a little condo by the sea. You can sit in the shade, a Mexican maid will clean up quietly. So get that line, get it straight, fly right through that Golden Gate. Let's be specific, let's hit the Pacific. Surfing, chirping, it's terrific. Go west, realize your dreams. Go west, eat pork and beans. Go west, wagons home.